Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
This all started my sophomore year of high school. I was 15 and at a new school, so I didn't have many friends yet. I was in that phase where I thought I needed a boyfriend to have validation, so I was actively trying to find a date for the homecoming dance. A classmate suggested a junior in one of her classes, whom I will call David, to be my date and got him to ask me out. He seemed nice, so I said yes, a decision that would haunt me for the next 2 years. David and I had fun at homecoming, so when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I said yes. It's important to note that he was quite the loner. He was very much into science and often spent alone conducting experiments in his room and even at school at times. I just brushed it off as him being quirky and figured I shouldn't get in the way of his passions. But it wasn't long before I realized there was much more to his nice guy facade. Over the first several weeks of our relationship, we would talk over the phone and David would make increasingly inappropriate comments about things he wanted to do to me. I was 15 at the time and he was 17, so not only was I incredibly uncomfortable, but he was also nearly an adult making these comments to a younger girl. I kept telling him I wasn't comfortable with the things he was saying, but he always laughed it off as me being prude. I was fed up after a while and finally threatened to break up with him, and that finally made him stop. I should have recognized the red flags and bailed at that moment, but again, I was dumb and felt I wasn't worth anything unless I had a boyfriend. Although the inappropriate comments stopped for the time being, he would still become increasingly possessive and downright obsessed over what I was doing at all hours of the day. He would intrude on conversations I had with my friends and want to know things that frankly weren't any of his business. One day when I was getting into the shower, he called and my dad told him I would call him when I was done. Instead of simply waiting like any rational person would do, he called a total of 4 times over the next 10 to 15 minutes to see if I was out of the shower yet. I began to feel suffocated, but every time I asked him to back off, he would cry about how depressed he was and that he only wanted to talk to someone to feel like he was wanted. I always fell for it like the dummy I was, but now I recognize the clear manipulation that it was. One day I finally had enough. I broke up with him in person at school and he bawled like a child. I didn't let it get to me this time, however, and firmly told him that I didn't want to be his girlfriend anymore. Although he couldn't get his way, he still somehow convinced me to stay friends. I know I was an idiot, but things didn't end there. Over the next several months, David kept trying to get me to go out with him again, even going as far as to cry in front of other people to garner sympathy. Fortunately for me, David had earned a bad reputation throughout his school year, so no one really believed him. He would even try to trick me into a date by subtly suggesting we go see a movie as friends, which I always got around by inviting my friends to come along too. They knew what he was doing and never turned down the chance to help a girl out. In the last few weeks I spoke to him, he would sit on the phone for hours on end literally begging me to take him back, and thankfully I held on strong and kept refusing. One night his brother actually called me telling me he was crying hysterically. Eventually it came to a point where I told him I didn't want to hang out anymore, because it was clear that he would not stop until I became his girlfriend again. He agreed to not approach me anymore, but I wouldn't be writing this story if it ended here. The very next day at school, David came up to me like nothing had happened. I once again reminded him of the conversation we had the night before about how we agreed to not hang out anymore, but he acted offended that I would even suggest such a thing. Eventually, my friends and I convinced him to leave, but of course it didn't stop there. For 2 weeks straight, he would follow me around school, call my house and my cell phone. For 2 weeks straight, he would follow me around school and call my house. This was the days before smartphones, so blocking his number wasn't as easy. I tried to get help from the school staff, but the vice principal basically told me that there was nothing I could do because he wasn't trying to hurt me. I was frustrated, but thankfully David seemed to back off when it was clear that I wasn't going to give in. That is until I got another boyfriend. The following school year, my junior year, I started dating a senior named Justin. Not long after we went public with our relationship, I noticed David following me again. Now Justin was a football player and he was a pretty big guy with unresolved anger issues, so he didn't take kindly to this guy. He would hang out with me and my friends and David would hover over nearby, walking by every now and then and making it blatantly obvious that he was spying on me. One day, Justin walked straight up to David and confronted him. He didn't lay his hands on him or threaten him in any way, but he did ask, "What are you doing?" in a really angry tone. David simply muttered some kind of excuse and scurried away. We thought that was the end of it, but later in the day I was called to the principal's office. Turns out David claimed that Justin threatened him and blocked the doorway so he couldn't move. Justin denied it, of course, and told the principal I could back up his claim, which I did. Thankfully, nothing came of it, but this was only the first of a long line of incidents. Over the school year, David and his brother, who was a year younger than me, would try to get Justin in trouble every which way they could, even started rumors and threatening his life. A classmate of mine overheard them talking about ambushing Justin and hurting him, but even though I brought this to the staff, nothing was done about it. All the while, David kept following me when Justin wasn't around. There was even an incident in the school gym one day when a bunch of classes had to stay there for the period. He and I both were there and he made sure to sit on the bleachers nearby, even following me when I moved. moved. I was on the verge of tears, but then I saw two guys I knew sitting on a few rows down from me. They were cool with me, so I got their attention and, after explaining what was going on, asked them if I could sit with them to feel safer. They accepted and we ended up having a good time talking about music. In spite of this, things just kept getting worse with David. Finally, it came to a head when David's brother wrote a letter to Justin's sister. They had been good friends before this whole mess started, and in the letter David's brother threatened physical harm to me and to Justin. The sister gave the letter to Justin, who then came to me, and we both brought it to the principal. That was when the principal called everyone involved into his office and had a nice little chat with us. The principal showed the letter to David's brother and said, "I can expel you for this right now, but I'm willing to let it go on one condition." David and Justin were both about to graduate, so the principal gave them the ultimatum. He stated that David and his brother were not to contact me or Justin in any way, shape, or form for the rest of the school year, or he would see to that neither of them would graduate. I was pissed because Justin did nothing wrong, but in the end, we just wanted this whole mess to be over with. From that point on, David didn't bother me again, thankfully. Justin and I ended up breaking up that summer for unrelated reasons, and the following year I didn't have to see either of them ever again. A few years later, however, David tried to send me friend requests on Facebook. I deleted the request and blocked them. I even unfriended and blocked the two mutual friends we had for good measure. Sure, I was being paranoid, but it made me feel better. There was one last incident involving David, not with me, but with my younger brother. When he was 14, he took his then girlfriend to see one of the Transformer movies and David walked in. Upon recognizing my brother, he sat behind him in his date and kept laughing uncontrollably at inappropriate times and even started kicking their seat. My brother tried confronting him, but it did no good. They didn't bother getting the manager because my brother's date was too afraid he would attack them if they tried to leave. Thankfully, that was the last incident I or anyone close to me ever had with him. I'm doing much better now. I'm 30 years old and, ironically, I ended up marrying one of the guys who sat with me in the gym that day. My advice to any teenagers reading this is that you should always pay attention to red flags and get rid of toxic people in your life. It's always better to end up alone than stuck with someone who makes you feel bad and treats you like your feelings don't matter. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretch of divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought that the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, the white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed at around 90 miles per hour. It's worth noting for later that I also drive a white Ford sedan. I was used to drunk/idiot drivers in the middle of the night, so I pulled to the side of the road and let him pass me. I had a moment of clarity and thought to call the police, thinking this person could hurt themselves or somebody else. The dispatcher answered, and after telling them which road and exit/mile marker I was at, told me they would send a car. The state police station was only a few exits away, so I figured they would send somebody and I would just drive home. As I headed back onto the highway, I noticed some lights a few miles behind me. I live in a more rural part of southeastern Pennsylvania, and traffic at 3 a.m. tends to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I thought I was going to be pulled over by the police. I drove a white Ford sedan and had just called out a different white Ford sedan, so I grabbed my registration from my glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. They must have shut off their car because the lights went out and I saw what looked like the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car. They had a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for a gun in my glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a little curt with me and assured me that they sent somebody out. Dispatcher, we have sent a trooper out to find the car, sir. Me, I only ask because somebody is following me and acting weird. It could be a cop, but I think I freaked them out by getting my registration. Dispatcher, are you pulled over? Me, no, they didn't turn on the lights. Dispatcher, let me try to get the trooper we sent out. As she was talking, the car again sped towards me and stopped inches from my bumper. Again, their high beams were on and again they slammed their brakes. I told the dispatcher, I'm pretty sure this is not the police behind me. The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. Dispatcher, what's happening? Did you honk? Me, that's the car behind me. I don't think it's a cop. Dispatcher, I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you. For some reason, this is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going to the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, I don't care if I get pulled over, I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over. I started to accelerate and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55 and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit then bail on it, but they followed. At the next exit, I took the off-ramp and continued onto the on-ramp and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about out trying to go to a Wawa gas station, but the dispatcher and I thought that it would be unsafe. She was calm and talking to another person trying to send police to me. The other person, maybe a supervisor, asked if I could drive to the state police station. Realizing that I was one exit away, I told her I was coming there and she said that she would have troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off to the exit, the car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal and the car slammed on its brakes again, turned off their lights, and turned into a parking lot. The story ends kind of anticlimactically as I pulled into the police station and met the troopers. Two of them went to find the car and I stayed with the third trooper. I think the dispatcher and her supervisor and the state trooper escorted me home after taking a statement from me. I was never called to follow up or testify, so I can only assume the person didn't get caught. I don't drink as a general rule, but once a month or so I'll go out with friends and binge. My friends and I had a great night at a bar in the city and they left. I was chatting up a cute guy, so I decided to stay. I went back to his place. After post-coitus, I'm ready to head home, so I call an Uber to pick me up. I don't know where I am, I know the city I'm in, but not my exact location. I ordered the Uber, but it's taking forever, so I cancel it and try again. Pretty soon a car pulls up. I drunkenly mumble something like, "Is this the Uber?" and I hop in. Mistake. Ubers apparently are supposed to have some kind of marking on their vehicle. The guy pulls away and starts driving. We're chatting, I'm fumbling for a cigarette, and the next thing I notice is that we're headed for the highway, but in the opposite direction of where I thought we needed to drive, and we're going at a solid 90 miles per hour. Then I get a call from an Uber driver. He's there and I'm not, because I'm in the car with someone else. I start texting my friend frantically, counting off mile markers for her. Then I realize that's going to do jack, because she's probably drunk too, so I call 911, but I realize this guy is crazy. He's refusing to let me out of the car, so I've got to do it on the sly. It's been about 40 minutes now. I'm terrified. I don't know where I am. I don't know who this is. We're driving at over 100 miles per hour, weaving in and out of traffic. This guy is trying to get me to hang up my phone call, and also smoking pot, so I don't want to do anything that might provoke a violent reaction from him. I start chatting to the 911 dispatcher as if it's my friend, praying that they'll catch on. "Hey girl, it's me. Yeah, I'm with someone right now. We're driving past highway exit." "No sweetie, it's not my Uber. I thought it was, but it's not. It's a shame you can't come and meet me and bring friends." Thankfully, the operator catches on. He gets me to stay on the phone while he sends cops, and we develop a code. If I see cops, I'm supposed to casually put my hand out the window, which looks semi-normal because I'm smoking a cigarette. We pull into some random little housing complex, and he busts out some powder and forms two lines. I now have confirmation that he does drugs, which means he's probably emotionally volatile. I relay this to the operator in code, "Oh girl, I wish you were here right now. This guy just busted out the coke. You'd love it. He's taken a really big bump, man after my own heart," etc. Pretty soon I can see the lights from the cop car, so I start waving my hand out the window. At this point, I don't care if he's on to me or not. I don't know if he has a weapon, but I slump down on my seat just in case things get hot. The cops surround us, get him out of the car, and then once it's safe, they extricate me as well. They whisk me to the hospital for a drug test and evaluation, and that's where my story ends. On my way to the hospital, as I'm explaining all of this to the officer, I find out that of the guy's 40-ish years on this earth, he's been in federal prison for 30 of them, for violent offenses. I want people to learn from my mistakes, and if nothing else, call 911 and stay on the line. For background, I'm a 24-year-old woman living in Australia and work at an establishment that caters for an adult audience. One night, as my shift is coming to a close, one of the patrons asked me to buy a drink, which I accept because employer policy. I talk him up to a couple of expensive drinks for the two of us, have a quick conversation, and make my excuses about my shift being over, but he should come back to see me soon. He starts to gaze at me and it feels uncomfortable. He stands up and with his creepy grin asks to walk me to my car. I know never to put myself in that position and politely decline, and I tell him I might see him next time. I walk out past our biggest bouncer and the guy doesn't follow me. Great, nothing extraordinary, just standard par for the course of my profession. But sadly, this isn't where our story ends. For this creep, it's only just the beginning. I'm off for a week after that night, but when I come back into work, I'm told a patron has been coming in every night for the last week asking for me. Says he wants to buy me another drink. Naively, I think, oh great, a bigger pay this week, and get set for my shift. The night rolls on and who should roll in but our man of the hour, and he asks for me. So I saunter over and he buys me a drink. The whole thing I'm sitting there with him, he just has this creepy grin on his face. Not like a normal creepy grin, that's just normal. No, this is the kind of grin where he knows something you don't and is very pleased with himself about that fact. So we're talking and I'm getting him ordering himself drinks and trying to upsell him where I can. About half an hour goes by and I make my excuses to leave so I can try to spread the tips around. But this guy isn't having it. He won't let me leave, and the more I insist, the angrier he gets. He's practically hissy at me by the time I give a look to one of the bouncers, who promptly comes over and diffuses the situation, giving me an opportunity to walk away. Great, crisis averted. Wrong. Bouncer doesn't throw him out, just gives me a buffer so this guy starts following me around the place, even attempting to walk into an employee-only area, which is where another bouncer finally notices and kicks him out. I finish my shift and walk over to my car. There he is, I kid you not, sitting on the bonnet of my car. How he knew it was my car I will never know. He wants me to give him a ride and tells me how pretty I look. He's spewing greasy slimeball creep lines at this point and I'm not interested. I try to give him a hint nicely and decline to give him a ride, but again he just turns to me and grabs me by my arm, insisting I give him a ride. I tell him to screw off and jam my key in his shoulder as hard as I can. He lets go and I push him with all my might so he falls down. I jump in my car, lock the door, and shove that key in the ignition. He's back up and banging on the window angrily to let him in. And I mean hard, so hard I think his hands or my window might break. I gun the accelerator and I'm out of there. When I get 5 minutes down the road and I'm sure I'm not being followed, I pull over to the side of the road and call back to work. I tell them what's happened and alert them that the other girls need to be careful leaving tonight. As I hang up the phone, I break into tears. I eventually compose myself, pull back onto the road and head home. I cry myself to sleep. Next morning word has gotten around and owner calls me to make sure I'm okay. I assure him I am, but he insists I take some time off in case this creep comes back. He wants to put some distance between us. Makes sense. A week goes by, then 2, he's coming in every night asking about me and being told I quit and don't work there anymore. I lie to get him to stop coming in, you know, but he just keeps coming in and asking, clearly not buying it, and then suddenly 2.5 weeks in, he stops. Great, I am really needing money at this point, so I'm happy to be able to go back to work the following week. Time goes on and everything seems to go back to normal. Same old chances, but the good kind that leads to higher paychecks. Abusive guy doesn't come back in, I'm happy. I start being forgetful though. I think I leave a door closed when I leave the house, but it's open when I get back. Lights on or off, food left out, things ending up in different places than I remember putting them sometimes moments before. I'm losing it, but it's probably just the stress of everything that's gone down. One of my close friends who works with me reassures me that it's normal after being grabbed like that and it will pass. This keeps up for a month until one day I head out to work, get 15 minutes down the road and realize I forgot some clothes I'll need that night at work. I head back home only to find the lights in my front room on and the TV visible as on from the outside. I really am losing it. Good thing I came back, I guess. I head inside, grab my stuff, make sure to turn the TV off and the light out and head to the door. Suddenly I freeze. There standing blocking the door is the creep that grabbed me. I'm stunned, jaw dropped on the floor. Then after what seems like a lifetime of standing in silence staring at each other, him smiling, I scream what the, I'm screaming for him to get out and ask him what he's doing here, how he knows where I lived, all in one jumbled mouthful of confusion. He just stands there with that smile on his face while I'm loudly freaking out but stupidly not moving. I start gasping for air in a mixture of panic attack and bewilderment, then he decides to speak in my wake. The words ooze out of him and leave me chilled. Welcome home, honey, you're back early. A switch goes off in my head, I throw everything I have on me at him and sprint to the back door. I'm out ski. I leg it faster than I have in my life, screaming bloody murder as I go. I hide in some bushes around the corner, tears running down my face, gasping for air. I check my pocket and my keys are still there. No phone though, I threw that at the stalker creep along with everything else. I sneak back to my house, jump in my car and nope out of there. I head to work, tell them what's happened and call the cops. Cops head to my house and send others to my work. Stalker guy is gone, but when they turn up, they search the house and turns out he's been living in my crawl space. I'm paranoid that's what all those doors and lights and misplaced things was about. I pack up whatever I can fit in my car while cops are still there, that they'll let me take, and I drive. Haven't been back since. I moved states, knew everything. This happened around 2006, when I was in my mid-20s and my sister, the unfortunate main character in the story, had just turned 21. At the time, she and her boyfriend lived with my fiance and I. On weekends, we went out to one of the 2 bars that had karaoke, air hockey, etc. This particular night, we were at the bar further out from where we lived in the city, a good half an hour by car. Everyone was having drinks, socializing with people we knew. It was one of those places, lots of regulars, singing karaoke, nothing out of the ordinary really. Except that night my sister started hanging out with these 2 older ladies who had a liquor store in their purses, and were quite sharing, although I didn't know it at the time. As she tended to drink a lot more than me, that was a score for her. Less money spent on drinks, but she ended up far more hammered than usual. Towards the end of the night, around 1:45, she was really very drunk. The aforementioned fiance, my sister's boyfriend, and I were in a heated air hockey game, planning to leave as soon as it was over. She walked up to us and said she was going to smoke a cigarette outside. Nothing unusual, everyone did until we were done. About 5 minutes later, we paid our tab and walked out, but she was not on the porch area where smokers congregated. Okay, weird, but not alarming. We went out back of the bar to check for her inside in the restroom in the large parking lot. It is notable that this particular bar was in a business park, so there were multiple businesses that were closed, as well as the Mexican restaurant next door that had just closed as well. We searched, asked everyone that knew us and those who didn't if they had seen her. No one had. I asked the workers from the restaurant that were sitting outside as well. They seemed nervous when telling me they hadn't seen her, but I didn't think on that much until later. By then I was in a full-on panic after trying to call her cell about 15 times only to have it go to voicemail. Being a bit inebriated myself, I started searching for her. Went as far as to take off my heels and start running down the highway searching for her, as honestly there had been times she would start walking home in the past, though never from this place as it was so far away from where we lived. The fiance and her boyfriend thought we should go to the house to see if she got someone to bring her home. Seemed unlikely but not unheard of. We get home and she's nowhere to be found. Just as we were about to head back and I was going to phone the police, I received a call from the PD on my phone. They indicated that they had my sister, that there had been an incident, and I needed to get down there. We rushed to the PD where we were taken into a room with my sister. Her face was red from obvious crying and bruises were starting to show on her arms and chest. She said that when she told us she was going outside, she thought we said we were leaving then, so she walked to the car. After a few minutes, being drunk and tired, she sat down up against it to wait. A van pulled up and a young man was asking her directions to somewhere. She walked closer to try to explain when suddenly the back door flew open and two other men grabbed her and threw her in, taking off. They were rough with her, hitting her a few times while holding her down, saying they only wanted money. They snatched her purse from her, breaking the straps and searched it, quite haphazardly as they didn't find the $30 she had in it. After driving around a bit speaking in Spanish, she couldn't understand they pulled out a gun, making sure she saw it and put a bandana around her eyes, telling her that they'd let her go. She was driven to some woods by a neighborhood she did not know. The door was opened and they pushed her out, telling her to run, that if she took the blindfold off or turned around, they'd shoot. She ran and ran. Eventually she did take the blindfold off and came to the first door she saw, beating on it and screaming for help. The police were called, she was picked up, and now we are back to my being there, hearing what I feared had happened. Report filed, police did a search and did locate the bandana she ripped off, but as she was so intoxicated and terrified, she was not able to give a clear description of the van other than white older model or the three occupants other than young Hispanic men. The investigation turned up nothing as no cameras caught any of this. We even had detectives in our home who said, look, we need the truth. If you got drunk and just went home with someone and didn't want your boyfriend to find out, we will file charges against you. Aside from the bruises, broken person or trauma, there was nothing concrete to go on. That was unpleasant. I am still fairly convinced someone at the restaurant knew something given their suspicious behaviors when I asked about her, but the police were never able to find that link. All said and done, the guys were never found. Eventually we just moved on, in different states. It's now just a story in our lives. It still makes me sick thinking of what could have happened, but thankfully it didn't. A little backstory, I was about 16 at the time, and I rode the public bus to and from school. This particular day, I had done some special effects makeup before the end of my classes, so I had fake blood running down my face and I couldn't be bothered to take it off before leaving school. Now I knew as I was boarding my bus, people would stare or ask questions, so I wasn't surprised when this man, who looked to be in his mid-30s, started asking about the makeup. The conversation was normal at first, just the usual, oh wow, did you do that yourself kind of stuff. I answered the questions as normally as I would and expected the conversation to be done and over with. But I was wrong. This man, he mentioned his name was Joe, started steering the conversation into strange territory, asking me if I had a boyfriend, to which I lied and said I did. He then proceeded to ask if my boyfriend liked the makeup and if I was on my way to see him now. I again lied and said he likes the makeup and yes, I was going to see him, trying to get Joe to believe someone was expecting me. The conversation died down for a bit until he said this, you know, you remind me a lot of my sister, he said with a grin. I just smiled in response, not really knowing what to say. After not hearing anything from me, Joe continued, my sister was kind of a jerk. She was always lying about me to her parents. I had fantasies about breaking her jaw. Now at this point I was terrified. My bus stop was still another 20 minutes away and I just wanted to be out of that situation. Seeing that what he said made me uncomfortable, he switched the subject, telling me about where he worked and what he does there. I just nodded along to what he was saying, remaining silent the entire time. Closer to my bus stop, he says to me, why don't you come to my house? I have a freezer full of pizza and ice cream. Maybe we can hang out for a while. To which I politely declined, saying my boyfriend was expecting me. Finally, I get to my bus stop and quickly get off the bus, speed walking all the way home, all the while calling a friend to inform them of what happened. Things were fine for a bit after that. I switched my bus route so I wouldn't run into him again. But one afternoon, I had to go to a store that was on my old route. I was nervous about getting on that bus again, but was happy when I didn't see Joe. I did my shopping, and as I was leaving the store, I saw Joe standing out by the door staring at me. The second I was out the doors, he walked over to me, a grin on his face, and wrapped his arms around me. I pulled away from him, telling him I was very busy and had to go. He then asked, "Well, what are you doing? I have time, I can tag along." I was very persistent, saying I really couldn't, I had to go, and I walked away, heading into a neighboring store that I knew would be busy. Sure enough, Joe followed. I ignored him as I made my way down a heavily populated makeup aisle, keeping my attention on some cheap lipsticks in the hopes he'd get the hint and leave me alone. I was wrong. Joe reached over my shoulder, grabbing a red lipstick as he leaned in close and whispered, "This color would look gorgeous on you. I can't wait to see you wearing it." He then placed the lipstick in my basket and walked away, leaving the store. I remained in the store for about 20 minutes after he left, afraid to leave and make the walk home. After I mustered up the courage, I put the lipstick back, put away the basket, and called a friend to stay on the line with me until I made it home. Now I don't know if he followed me home or not, but I can say that after that day, the motion detector porch lights started coming on at night, and I started hearing knocks at my bedroom window. Thankfully, I moved shortly after and haven't seen Joe since. This happened 2 summers ago while I was house sitting out in California for an older couple I had met at a conference for work. It had seemed like a dream scenario. The couple wanted to vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks, but didn't want to board their cats, and I had been chatting with them about wanting to visit California again, where they happened to live, because I had loved it for the first time I went, and we figured that we could mutually benefit if I came out and house sat for them. So I flew out there, and they showed me around for a few days, taught me how to take care of the cats, 2 of them, one that was extremely shy and I barely saw, which is important later, and their plants, gave me access to their house and cars. These people were so generous, and before I knew it, I had dropped them off at the airport and I was on my own. At first, it was really the dream vacation. I was staying in Oakland and making forays into San Francisco, Sonoma, Monterey. In the mornings, I could walk out the front door and shortly be hiking the paths surrounding nearby Mount Diablo, and I was just ultra content with the world. I was so enamored by the area that I had actually started looking into taking some steps to relocate out there even. But then one day, about halfway through my final week there, when I got back to the house, I felt really odd, almost like I shouldn't go inside. I shook it off and went inside anyway, because it was getting late and I needed to put out dinner for the cats. Once I was inside, I forced myself to ignore how off I felt, and I made some food for myself, went to bed, and was shocked to find the shy cat hiding under my bed and crying. This was the first time I had ever seen her close up. The entire time I had been there, up to that point, she never left my host's bedroom unless she didn't realize I was around. Again, I ignored feeling weird, and just assumed she had decided I was okay and went to bed. I did start locking my bedroom door that night though. I also remembered that about halfway through that night, I thought I heard someone walking around in the gravel outside my window, but after listening for a bit, I didn't hear anything else and went back to sleep. The day after, in the morning, I still felt a little odd, but kept up with my plans for the day. I drove out to a little musical festival in Sonoma and went clothes shopping and had an overall great day. When I got back to the house though, I found the front door locked in a way that I hadn't left it. Basically, my host never locked the deadbolt, only the lower second lock, and that's the only lock my key worked on, so I never messed with the deadbolt, but it was definitely locked. So I had to call my host and find the hidey key, which, to their credit safety-wise, was buried like a whole foot underneath a bush outside and had definitely not been unearthed for a long time. So I used that, went inside, and kept the key with me just in case it happened again. And it did, but with a different door. This time I had stepped out into the garage to get a drink, and when I turned around to go back into the house, the door was shut and locked. I could use my normal key on that door, but I was still getting pretty bewildered. My own cats are whack, so I think in my mind I was trying to come up with a way that the cats could be locking me out the house, but I was coming up empty. I decided I must have been misunderstanding how the locks worked and just wrote it off and started checking and triple checking locks when I went out of the house or into the garage. That night when I went to bed, the really awful feeling of unease was still there, and so was the shy cat, who was clearly unhappy to see me, but also wouldn't leave my room. But again, I just locked my bedroom door and went to sleep. The next morning I felt awful, nausea, body ache. I had no desire to leave the house, so I decided to stay in and Netflix for a day. This vacation stay was like a full 2 weeks, so I didn't feel like I was in any hurry to get all the touristy things in anyways. But as the days went on, I started to feel that feeling of wrongness again, and it morphed into feeling incredibly watched. Around mid-afternoon, it got to the point that I was so uneasy that, even feeling awful, I decided to get out of the house for a bit to shake it off. I was getting a bit low on food, so I went to the grocery store and bought a couple food items that I didn't think would hurt my stomach, and then I left. When I got to my car, I started crying and my entire body was telling me not to drive back to the house. I couldn't not though, because I didn't didn't want to neglect the cats, so I drove back, parked in the driveway, and convinced myself after about half an hour to just go open the front door. Once I did that, I thought I would get over it and would be able to go in and at least feed the cats, and then maybe I'd go get a hotel room after, but my body physically would not let me inside. It was like I was stuck in the entryway. I then made a deal with myself. I would yell into the house saying I had already called the police and that they were on their way. In panic logic, I figured that would make anyone in the house leave, so I faced the inside of the house, looking down the hallway towards the bedrooms, and I did just that. The second I had finished saying, "They're almost here, so if you want to avoid being arrested, you need to leave now," the light in my host room turned on and I heard some banging. I immediately hightailed it back to the car, called the police for real, and proceeded to have a mental breakdown while talking to the dispatcher. Once they got there, they checked the house and didn't find anyone. The double doors in my host's bedroom were left wide open. I'm so glad the cats didn't get out, and there was a pile of food wrappers in the corner behind the blinds, so they said it looked like someone had been there. What makes it so scary to me is that nothing was taken, and that based on the shape of the house, that would have been the perfect vantage point to see me in the living room as I stayed home sick. To explain this, the house was in an L shape, and from the windows into the garden that were in my host's bedroom, you could see into the living room windows. Also, the minute the police were gone, they said they couldn't prove anyone was there were no signs of forced entry, and we couldn't get a hold of my host immediately to verify if anything had been taken, etc., which once they were back, they verified that nothing had been taken, so they said they'd patrol a bit but nothing else. The shy cat was right back into my host's bedroom, and I didn't see her again until I left to go back home. So basically, I think the intruder had been there at least 2 days, forcing her to choose between two strangers, and leading her to choose the one that was at least a little less strange, me. It messed me up pretty bad, especially because they didn't catch the person, and didn't seem to have any desire to look, and I still had to stay in the house for the next 3 days. Nothing else odd happened, and I didn't feel off the rest of the time I was there, but the damage was done. I've never felt completely safe in a home without doing a complete search before bed since, but I am extremely glad my gut spoke up. I guess I'd rather have some residual anxiety than be dead. So about 5 years ago, I, male 26 years old, set out to travel the world. Being straight out of college had left me dead, ever more desperate for any job I was overqualified for, and generally depressed. I felt isolated and alone in my small town in Washington and found the only way to get out, travel. My high school buddy suggested I look into COMPILATIon and volunteering as a way to travel cheap, and so I did. The way it works is quite simple. You work for around 25 hours a week on some farm for food and housing. The draw is that since the community of cheap travelers is quite big, it is a great way to meet new people, get outside of your comfort zone and just let yourself live and figure life out. Fast forward 8 months and I'm a seasoned cow patty shoveler. I started out in Washington, Oregon, and went south to California. There, I was able to save some money I was paid under the table for some extra work and was now faced with a decision, where to go in the world. The excitement of being able to purchase a ticket to almost anywhere in the world got the best of me, and on the advice of my volunteering partner, I chose it at random. I went to a randomizer website and clicked the country button, Georgia, the country of Georgia. To say I didn't know anything about it was an understatement, but the fear of the unknown made it exciting and exotic somehow, and so I did it. I purchased a ticket and started browsing for a farm that could host me. There were a few options, and most were remote and hadn't even had an internet connection. I messaged every single one because few ever respond, and got a response from one farm on top of a mountain. The pictures showed a traditional Georgian stone house with a large garden out in the back, a family with several cheerful children, grandparents having dinner, animals. It seemed warm and inviting. The description was written in good English, and the requirements for work seemed reasonable. I was excited. After I flew into Tbilisi, the capital, I followed the instructions that they have sent to locate the farm, which wasn't an easy task. Few in Georgia speak English, the roads are screwed since few have been maintained since the fall of the Soviet Union, and the country is generally poor. It took me around 20 hours of Soviet buses and taxis, weird serpentine roads and paths to get to the desired blue pin on my map. It was a dirt path leading up a steep hill into a national park up in the north of the country. There was nothing for miles on end but trees and their silence. As I got up that hill, I saw the house about half a mile away on even a steeper hill, surrounded by the trees. From that viewpoint, it seemed abandoned, overgrown, brown, and dreary. As I walked past the gate, Giri, fake name, the apparent owner approached me. He was a heavy, small, middle-aged guy with a big smile on his face. He shook my hand and in broken English started to show me around. He also smelled of booze. As he was showing me around, I noticed that there wasn't anyone there but us. I asked about his wife and kids and he brushed that aside and said something to the extent, "They're away right now." By this point, I am creeped out. From browsing around, it was apparent that the farm was in deep decline. Apple trees and crops were dying, the roof of the small barn caved in, and the house itself full of trash and smelling of mold. It was obvious that Giri was going through a rough patch, but I wasn't going to turn around and just leave in the middle of nowhere, without a plan, having not slept for the past 36 hours. It was evening, and after feeding me well and trying as best as he could to hold a conversation in English, Giri showed me my room on the second floor and I went to sleep. I almost immediately blacked out from the exhaustion and stress, and would have slept for 10 hours if I wasn't awoken by a strange noise in the middle of the night. It sounded like something metallic and heavy was being dragged across the wooden floor. In that sleepy in-between state, I listened to it for a few minutes, thought nothing of it, and went back to sleep once it stopped. In the morning, Geary, now sober and grumpy, asked me to repair some of the windows and doors in the house as he himself planned to go and fetch some components in a nearby village. Again, I got this weird feeling creeping down my spine. Something wasn't right. He didn't maintain eye contact and was evasive. There was no cell reception, no internet. Once he left, I checked around the house to get a general idea of the place, and it became apparent that the place was hardly ever lived in, like one of those abandoned houses. There was broken furniture, newspapers, and old photos on the floor, a shattered mirror. I took my phone and looked through the saved listing again. The photos didn't match neither the backyard, the garden, or the walls. Geary wasn't in any of them. It was a completely different house. Now by this point, I am full-blown panicking. I pack my stuff and start to leave when I see a group of 3 men going up that first hill. There aren't any other paths I can take, so I go behind the house and rush down this hill into the forest. After some time I stop and listen. I hear them in the house. They're clearly looking for me. Afraid of making any noise, I remain still, hidden behind a bush. I don't know how long I wait, but they were persistent. At some point I hear them leave, so I count until some large number and proceed back into the house and path, and once I find it's all clear, I book the heck out of there. Never ran this fast, but I am still in the middle of nowhere. No traffic, no public transport. I reached a paved road and start walking in the general direction from where I remember coming. Hours go by and finally a car drives by and stops. It was a really nice Russian family that gave me a ride to town. The listing disappeared from the website a few days later I left, and I haven't heard from Geary since. I've yet to make sense of that experience. I have traveled since and volunteered too, and have yet to have an experience like that again, but I trust my gut feeling something was really not right. More than a few years ago, I was working as a burlesque entertainer in a gentleman's club. I was idly sitting at the end of the bar one night when a couple came in. Not unusual. I had no contact with them and thought nothing of their being there until later. A few days after that night, the doorman handed me a piece of paper that had 2 names and phone numbers written on it, Laura and Richard. I was supposed to call one of them, so I called Laura, who told me they had been the couple who'd been at the bar the other night, and they noticed me and thought I'd be perfect for a part in a movie Richard was producing. Would I be up for a meeting? Of course I would, who wouldn't? I was told Richard would pick me up the next night at 7 and to wear something wild. 7 o'clock came the next evening and I was ready in a white lace dress with ostrich feather trim when Richard showed up outside my building, so I went down, introduced myself, and got in the car. We agreed to go to a local bar I knew well for the meeting, but first we had to go back to his place so he could pick up some contracts he'd forgotten, so off we went. He went in the house and came back out with a few manila envelopes and an open bottle of beer, a brand that I didn't drink. Plus, it's against the law to drink alcohol in a vehicle here, so I stuck the beer into the window well of his Jeep and we went to the bar. At the bar, he showed me what were supposedly scripts from this movie he was producing. In some contracts, it looked pretty legit. Richard was very nice and I was interested. I had made some plans to go out later with my soon-to-be boyfriend, so I excused myself to go call him on the bar's payphone, and took my Corona that I'd ordered at the bar with me to the bank of phones. As a dancer, I'd been taught by the other older girls to never let your drink out of sight. My boyfriend wanted to get going to another club, so I went back to the table where Richard was and told him I had to go. He didn't like that and tried a few different things to get me to go to the movie set with him, saying I could meet Mickey Rourke and check out the set, but all I really wanted to do was meet my boyfriend, so I declined, took Richard's card, and left. I never heard from Richard again, but a couple of months later, the police came around to the bar I was working at. They had 2 big books of mugshots and a stack of Polaroids with them, and they wanted to talk to all of us about a predator couple who had been setting up meetings with dancers by saying they were in the film industry, then drugging them. They showed me the 2 mugshot books and asked if I saw anyone I recognized in the pictures, and I immediately identified Richard and Laura. They then showed me the Polaroids, which were trophy pictures of the couple in the act of attacking the poor drug girls, and asked if I knew any of the victims and where they might find them, in order to talk to the girls. I only knew a couple of women in the photographs, but there were a lot that this had happened to. Richard and Laura were prosecuted. He went to jail, but she didn't because she was from a wealthy family and she also turned witness on him. About 12 years after Richard was convicted, I saw in the newspaper that he was up for possibility of parole, so I wrote a letter to the parole board telling this story and urging them not to let him back out, because he's a dangerous offender who should have to stay in prison for the entirety of his sentence. If I had drank that open beer he had handed me in his Jeep on the way to that meeting, I wouldn't have made it to the meeting and would probably have ended up in that stack of Polaroids. Girls and guys, always keep your eye on your drinks. Have fun, but be careful out there. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. So this happened about 1.5 years ago. I moved to Los Angeles 3 years ago. First time living on my own and I love it. Even with everything that happened, I still love living here. So I'm a smoker, on average about 3 to 4 cigarettes a day. So thankfully I'm only at a pack, like every 5 or 6 days, whatever. Math isn't my strong suit. Anyway, I live in a non-smoking building, so I have to step outside when I want to smoke. The first time I saw this guy, he was outside my building, sitting next to a dumpster. No big deal, probably just another neighbor I hadn't met. His name is Oz. The first time I saw Oz, I was having a cigarette outside, and he just glanced over at me every once in a while, but that's it. 2 days later, it's like 11:30 p.m. and I'm heading downstairs to smoke. I look at the lobby of the building and see someone underneath a blanket behind some chairs. I see a cord going behind the blanket bulge, so I immediately assume someone's in the doghouse for the night and charging their phone. I have my smoke, head back upstairs, and go to sleep. A week later, it's the middle of the day. I've gotten some work done and decided to take a smoke break. I go and sit outside like I always do. Oz is sitting outside as well. This time he's got some paperwork with him. A lot of paperwork. At this point, I feel like I should provide a description of Oz. He's about 6 feet tall, early to mid-30s. He has medium length hair that has been styled into dreadlocks. A full but short beard, if that makes sense. He was wearing worn down pants and jackets. Based on his face, he seemed like he cleaned himself up regularly, but his clothes made him look homeless, and sadly he was. So Oz is going over the paperwork in his hands when he looks over at me and says hi, so I responded kind. He then asked me how I'm doing today. I'm doing pretty okay, I respond. How are you? I'm good, man, I'm good. Good. It's a nice day, right? Yeah, it is. So when are you moving? Now that question came out of nowhere. Was he hoping to find a new place to live? Was he trying to move into this building? Was that what his paperwork was all about? I mean, if he's moving into a new apartment, great. I hope life works out well for him. But why was he asking me when I'm moving out? I know the building at the time had a vacancy or two, so if he was going to move in, why ask a question like that? Why make it sound like he's waiting for someone to move out so he can have a spot? My brain asked all those questions in less than a second of Oz asking me that. After a couple seconds of being stunned by Oz's question, I just said, I'm not moving anytime soon, man. My cigarette was over by then, so it was time for me to go to my apartment. Another week later, I go see a friend stand up set, and when I get back to my apartment at like 10 p.m., I see 2 police SUVs outside my building with lights on. I go inside because if there are 2 police vehicles already there, I can't do anything, so might as well stay out of the way. The cops are talking to one of my downstairs neighbors, and I can't catch anything they're talking about. 2 days later, notices have been put up next to the mailboxes that say, this man is not allowed in this building, and it has a photo of Oz. Turns out the blanket bulge I saw was actually Oz, when he somehow managed to get inside the building and sleep in the lobby with an electric blanket. A couple of months go by and I don't see Oz. I honestly forgot about him by that point. When finally one day, Oz is there again, sitting outside the building with somehow even more paperwork. This time when he sees me, he's almost immediately hostile. So when are you getting out of here? What? I want my apartment back, man. I don't know what you're talking about. You stole my apartment and I want it back. I was so confused by this. I snuffed my cigarette out and went back into the building. This exchange pretty much repeated itself every few days for the next 2 weeks, each time making me more and more uncomfortable. On weekdays, I would get home very late, like anywhere between 11:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. Oz never had a predictable pattern to his appearances, so I started getting really nervous about going home. Like, I wanted to avoid going home so I could avoid being accosted by Oz. Finally, one Saturday after lunch, I step outside and have a smoke. Oz is there, and this time he's mad. He's saying that if I don't get out of his apartment by the end of the day, he'll get me. That shook me up a lot. I got back inside and stayed there. Around midnight, I decided to step outside and have a smoke, hoping against hope that Oz isn't there, but lo and behold, Oz is there. Wizard. He's sitting by the dumpster again, and I go to the opposite direction to inhale smoke. I see Oz go up to the stoop and stand in front of the door to the building. Great. When my cigarette is done, I head to the stairs to get into my building. Oz steps to block me from getting to the door. Excuse me, I say as I try to go past him, but he stops me. You ain't getting in here, he says. Why? Because you don't live here. Yes, I do. No, you don't, man. You don't live here. Yeah, I do live here. Now please move out of my way. Maybe if I stay kind, he'll let me go home, but no, he doubled down. Nah, man, you can't get in here because you don't live here. For the last time, I live here. Prove it, man. You got paperwork? Yes, I have a lease. Where? I was getting really irritated at this point, so my answer started becoming really cold. Like I was getting pretty rude to this guy. I don't carry it with me everywhere I go. Now move aside and let me in. No, now you need to get out of here. Move. Nah, now you need to get out of here or I'm calling my security team. No, you need to move or I'm calling the cops. Do it, man. My security guys are already on their way. They're gonna screw you up. At this point, I was already stepping away from the door and pulling out my phone. I called the non-emergency number because in the moment I didn't feel threatened by Oz, but I should have called regular dispatch instead of non-emergency. Cops got there about half an hour later and Oz was still there. The cops came and got out of their car. One cop was holstering their nightstick and dropped it on the ground, then holstered it properly. The two cops that showed up separated and talked to Oz and I separately. I tell my cop that I was just trying to get back into my building. He's blocking me. He's been harassing me lately, saying I need to move out. Oz, however, had a very different story. He claimed that I stole his apartment from him, stole his credit cards, and stole his insurance payouts. The apartment he claimed I stole from him isn't the apartment I live in. The cherry on top of this lack of a sundae is the part where he accused me of throwing dog water on him. An actual water bottle filled with a mixture of dog spit and water. That's the guess I have as to what dog water is. First he claimed I threw it up at him while I was standing on the sidewalk and he was on the stoop. Then he claimed I was on the fire escape above him and literally poured the water on him from above. Thankfully the cops knew immediately that this was a lie, but because I guess no actual crime had been committed, all they could do was tell Oz to go away. He was not happy about it, but he did. I hoped that Oz would not come back after that, but sadly I was wrong. Oz did come back just one last time. A few days later, it's the middle of the day and I'm walking downstairs to inhale fire. As I step outside, I see two cops, Oz and one of my downstairs neighbors. Oz and my neighbor are separated and giving statements to the cops. When my neighbor is done, his name is John. I go up to him and ask him what happened. John then shows me his elbows, both scraped up and lightly bleeding. One of his knees is also lightly cut up. Oz also had a couple of bruises and light cuts on him. John tells me that as he was trying to enter the building earlier, Oz was standing right outside and tried to force his way in. John stopped him and tried to tell him to leave. The two got into a small fight and the cops were called. I decide to sit outside with John while everything is being figured out and while John is waiting for his wife, a nurse, to get home and look him over. The manager of the building is called and helps the cops to look at the security camera footage for the front of the building. After looking at it for about 10 minutes, the cops and manager return. Sadly, the fight took place outside of view of the cameras, so it became a case of he said, so all the cops can do is tell Oz to leave once again. Since then, I have not seen Oz anywhere near my building, and a sign has been put up outside the building stating, "This building is not open to the public, no unauthorized entry," which is both comforting and disconcerting. This event took place quite a few years ago, so unfortunately I don't remember everything that happened, but I remember nearly all of it. Anyways, this happened when I was around 4 to 5 years old and on Easter Sunday. My family always gathers at my grandmother's house to celebrate holidays, birthdays, etc. So as we do every holiday, my mother and I started our hour-long trip to her house. My mother prefers to live away from all the city commotion, which explains the long drive. We were probably around 20 minutes away from our destination when my mom noticed that we were a little low on gas, so we pulled into this old, almost rustic looking gas station with just a handful of customers inside. It was red and white with a few festive decorations outside and lots of Easter stickers on the two large glass windows that were on either side of the door. My mom, having taught me not to talk to strangers nor open the doors for anyone but her, trusted me enough to leave me in the car alone as she went inside briefly to pay for gas. She told me she would be right back before going into the gas station. It felt nice that day, so the windows in the car were down so we could feel the breeze while driving instead of the AC. While I was waiting on my mom, I remember adjusting the colorful paper clippings in my Easter basket next to me, then looking out of the backseat window. When I looked over, I saw a tall, older man, maybe around 30 or 40 years old, approaching my window. He crouched down slightly and looked at me. "Hi there, what's your name?" I remember him saying. At this moment, I remembered that I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, so I told the man that my mom says I shouldn't speak to strangers. He then replied with, "Well, we could be friends then. My name's Charlie, and now that you know, I guess I'm not a stranger now, huh?" At the time, I thought he was right. In my mind, I thought, since a stranger is someone you don't know, this man wasn't a stranger anymore because I knew his name. The man and I had a short conversation that I don't quite remember. All I remember is him telling me that I had a nice Easter basket. At this point, I started to get a sick feeling in my stomach, but being a child, of course, I didn't know why. My mom then walked out of the gas station and noticed the man immediately and began approaching the car quickly, asking the man what he thinks he's doing. The man seems to panic and he pulls my door handle violently. He quickly realized that it was locked, thankfully, and proceeded to reach into my window and grab me by one of my wrists and attempt to pull me out. This obviously scared me a lot, causing me to panic and pull him against on instinct. This caused him to let go and take off running. My mom quickly ran to the car and I unlocked the doors. She grabbed me and pulled me into an almost painful bear hug, then inspecting me closely, repeatedly asking if I was okay. I ended up with a slight bruise/redness on my arm where he grabbed me, but other than that I was just shaken up. The reality of what had just happened set in at this moment, and I remember just crying and holding onto my mom right after I said I was okay. I don't remember anything after this point, but I recently asked my mom about it and she said that she called the police immediately after. To this day, my mom still says that this was the most frightening moment of her life and claims that if she had gotten there any later and came back to an empty car, she wouldn't have been able to live with herself. I am a female and now 23. This happened around the time that I was 15 years old. Around this time it was my sophomore year in high school, so little backstory to help understand the story I'm about to tell. I was involved in my high school color guard. We are a part of band except we don't play instruments. We would spin colorful flags. We also use rifles and sabers in our performances. Around this time it was the fall and we were practicing our show, doing a lot of reruns to try and perfect it before our usual competitions. Normally practice would start at 4 and end almost at 9. Side note, I didn't live close to my high school like most people that went there. The drive would take at least 15 minutes max. Walking from my house to school would take an hour and taking the bus would take 45 minutes. My brother at this time worked late hours and my parents didn't get off of work until midnight, so my next best choice was the bus. The neighborhood wasn't the worst, but it also wasn't safe to be walking home at night. So on this night, I was saying goodbye to my friends and not wanting to bug them for a ride, I walked to my bus stop. I had my cell phone and started scrolling through Facebook. I would occasionally glance up and look at my surroundings. I noticed a car slowing down in front of my bus stop, but it immediately signaled to make a turn to my left. I didn't think much about it since there are houses behind that bus stop. It wasn't weird until I noticed this car doing that again and then again and again. I found this odd. It wasn't until he had basically passed by me for the 7th time that he finally parked on the curb by my bus stop. That's when I got a good look at him and that I took in his appearance. This happened a couple of years ago, so my memory isn't great, but I do remember he was Hispanic and reminded me a bit of an uncle of a friend of mine. He spoke his first words to me that sent me panicking. To translate what he said to me in Spanish, it was basically him saying, "Hey, come over here, do you need a ride? Hop in, I'll take you." He kept saying that for a good 5 minutes and then suddenly drove off. I then let out a breath I didn't know I was holding in. I was trying to calm myself down and tell myself it was over, but I knew it wasn't and I was right. His car showed back up and the thing about my bus stop is that there is a house behind it, except before the house there is a good amount of space with just dirt. Cars can actually go in this space and I've seen it before. He parked behind my bus stop. At this moment I was already thinking about how to get out of the situation. I was frozen in place, not fight or flight but freezing. The worst thing to ever do. At this time this big guy was close by and was walking his pit bull on a leash. In my frozen state I knew this was my only chance and fought to get the words out. It was my only chance to save myself and I'm so glad I spoke out. "Excuse me, could you please stay with me? That man in the car right there won't leave me alone. I'm very scared. Please stand by my side." My words choked up and I was shaking at this point. The guy was kind-hearted and agreed. He stared down the man who at this point had his window up and began reversing. He drove off and the guy stayed with me till my bus came. At this time it was 9:59. I know that some of you might ask, why didn't you go back to your high school? Well, at this point no one was really there. Mostly everyone had been picked up. I had a cell phone but no one was going to be able to pick me up. This was my only transportation and that time I didn't know about Lyft or Uber. I'm not even sure if it was a thing back then. Overall, I'm just happy to have been saved by that kind-hearted guy. Because of him, I am here and able to share this story of mine. I'm still shaken up at the memory of it because of the scare it gave me. After that incident, I asked for a ride for the remaining of that season. Sometimes, even when you don't want to bug people with rides, it doesn't hurt to ask. It's better to be that annoying person than finding yourself in my situation. Stay safe when taking the bus at night. I work evenings as a dispatcher in a medium-sized Midwestern city. I was driving home at 2 a.m. when I stopped for gas. In retrospect, it was stupid to have stopped at all. The gas station was poorly lit and completely empty of any other customers, but I knew the shady areas of town and this was not usually one of them. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a middle-aged woman sitting on the curb across the parking lot. It was a cold night and had just started raining. The woman was not wearing weather-appropriate clothing, so she was drenched. When the woman saw that I was watching her, she called out to me from across the parking lot. My second of many stupid decisions that night was choosing to engage with her. I was worried for her, so I approached her to see what sort of help I could offer. "Hi beautiful, I'm just trying to get home, but no one will help me," she said. "I'm trying to get to City A, but the cab ride is $60 and I only have $40. Can you help me?" I don't usually give money to panhandlers, but this woman seemed genuine. The weather was terrible and my job centers around helping people, so I agreed. I told her I didn't have any cash, but if she would come with me inside, I'd take some money out of the ATM and give her a few dollars. But the ATM wasn't working. I apologized and told her there was nothing else I could do for her. She followed me back outside, idly chatting with me as I opened my driver's door to get in, and then she got in my car. I was too shocked to really say anything. I sat staring at her as she buckled herself into the passenger seat. As soon as she got into my car, her demeanor changed entirely. She no longer seemed forlorn, as much as she did extremely excited and restless. "Just take me to my aunt's house," she said. "She can give me money." Of course, alarm bells are going off in my head. Although my first instinct is to tell her to get out of my car, My gut tells me that that would be dangerous. She'd already proven to be unpredictable, she seemed to be high, and I didn't know if she had any weapons on her. Forcing her out of my vehicle, I thought, had the potential to elicit a violent reaction. "Where are you asking me to take you?" I finally said. "Just start driving, I'll tell you where to turn." "No, if you want me to consider driving you somewhere, I need you to tell me where we're going," I say, with no real intention of driving her anywhere. "Don't worry, honey, I'm not gonna rob you or nothing, just drive." "No," I repeated, "where's your aunt's address?" "Okay, it's on Street A. What's the house number?" As I was asking her questions, she got really agitated. We still had not left the gas station parking lot. I considered getting out of the car and going into the gas station to help, but A, she had seemed to know and be friendly with one of the attendants that was inside when I tried to get money, and B, I wasn't about to leave her alone in my car. Finally, she snapped at me and said, "Why are you asking me so many questions? I thought we were friends. You don't trust me?" "I work at a police department," I said. "It's my job to ask these sort of questions." She flipped out. She started yelling at me about being a snitch, about trying to get her into trouble, just in general losing her mind. At this point, I'm more scared than ever. I just wanted her gone, but my instinct still told me asking her to get out of my car wouldn't work, so I decided to take a risk. "I'm not a police officer, I just work at a police department. Why don't I take you to Walmart and see if they have an ATM that works?" My idea was to get her out of my car as peacefully as possible, then lose her in the store. She liked my idea and immediately calmed down. I knew that driving off with this woman in my car was incredibly risky, but it seemed like the best option at the time. As we're driving, she keeps talking to me. Her thoughts were erratic, bouncing all over the place. It sometimes seemed difficult for her to follow through one thought, but this is roughly how our conversation went. "I'm glad we're friends now. I have about 5 or 6 people trying to get to me. I'm going to come to your work tomorrow so we can go arrest them together." "Okay, we can talk about that tomorrow. Tonight you said you're trying to get home?" "Yes, honey, I'm trying to get to City B." "City B? I thought you said you needed to go to City A." Yeah, City A, that's what I meant. That's why the cab ride is $40. It's far away." "The cab ride is $40? Yeah, you said you have $40. "I do, I have $40, but the cab ride is $60. Silence. "Are you sure you can't take me to my aunt's house? She lives close by on Street B." "I thought you said she lived on Street A." "No, I meant Street B, but it doesn't matter because she won't give me my money anyway." "You sure you just can't take me to City A?" It was obvious that this woman was utterly full of it, because the details of her story were constantly changing. When we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, she finally got out of my car, only after I got out first, and followed me into the store. I told her before we went to find an ATM I needed to use the restroom. My plan was to call the police from inside a stall, but she followed me into the bathroom, and that's when things got really weird. She grabbed the crook of my arm and whispered into my ear, "If you don't got any money to give me, that's okay, but let me ask you something. Do you want to do it in the stall?" I told her no as forcefully as I could manage, bolted into a stall, and locked the door as fast as I could possibly manage. As soon as I had a barrier between us, I said, "You know, I have some friends at the police department that can probably help you better than I can. I'm just gonna call them and we can figure this out together." Again, at the mention of the cops, she started screaming at me. I just kept reiterating that the police would help her. She snapped at me that she was just going to leave and stormed out of the bathroom. But it wasn't over. I waited to make sure she was really gone. Sure enough, not 60 seconds after she left, she came back into the bathroom and started banging on the stall door. And she said something that scared me more than anything else. "Hey, come back to your car with me. I left my beer in your car." I blatantly tell her that no. I saw her get into my car and she had absolutely nothing with her other than the clothes on her back. After that, she left the bathroom again and didn't come back. I waited a good 5 minutes before exiting the bathroom. I immediately found a manager who called the police for me. Thankfully, I was in a different police jurisdiction from the one I work in because I was mortified at how entirely stupid I had been the whole night and would have died of embarrassment if any of my coworkers had responded. The officer that responded took my statement and advised me to be more careful in the future. He said that sometimes panhandlers turn violent, and that just recently there had been a report of a woman who matched my description assaulting a good Samaritan that had stopped to try to help her. I definitely learned a lesson on stranger danger, and I'm lucky to have come out not harmed. I'm glad my stupidity didn't kill me. This happened a few years ago when I was around 20 or so. I was hanging out with my buddy Matt at my apartment, located in the downtown area of a medium-sized Midwestern city. We were drinking whiskey, watching comedies, playing tunes, etc. He mentions that he has a close friend, Emily, who used to live in my apartment building with her mother. She now lives across the street from me, and he thought it would be a swell idea if we met because apparently we are very similar and I was single at that point in my life. He rings her cell and tells her to come by my place. She arrived at my apartment and I instantly became fond of her. She was hilarious, very pretty, and a musician just like me. She was around 30 or 10 years older than me. My friend Matt was 35. I've always had friends that are much older for some reason. We played songs together and laughed hysterically for hours. Matt decided to go home, leaving us two alone. We chilled for a while longer, ended up making out, and I got all of her contact info before she told me she's going home and that we should meet up soon. Over the next few weeks, we developed a strong relationship, and we hang out almost daily. I would throw some pajamas on and walk across the street, and we'd get wasted and watch movies. It was awesome. After arriving home from my 10-day trip to New York City, things got really weird. The day I returned, she asked if she could come over, so I unpacked my stuff and then told her to stop by. She rings the buzzer, takes the elevator 7 floors up to my apartment, and lets herself in. I was talking nonstop about all the awesome things I did and people I met in New York City, and I could immediately tell she didn't want to hear any of it. She would change the subject every time I brought it up, and eventually she said, "Can you stop talking about New York? I really don't care." I was surprised to hear her speak like this. The Emily I had been getting to know was not like this. She was caring and passionate and an amazing person, so I thought. Fast forward to a few nights later. I had just gotten home from a working 12-hour shift and I collapsed in my bed, ready to pass out for the night. It's about 9 p.m. and I get a text from Emily that says, "Hey, what's up?" I don't feel much like replying at that moment. I am too exhausted and our last hangout was too weird for me to comprehend, so I am still trying to decide how to deal with that. I plug my phone into my charger, turn the lights off, and fall asleep. Bang, bang, bang. I wake up to somebody pounding on my door and screaming at the top of their lungs. "Open the door, let me in now." My entire apartment reeks like cigarette smoke. I grab my phone from beside my bed, my heart beating a million miles per hour. 27 missed phone calls, a bunch of text messages, all from Emily. I scan through the text while she's still at the door screaming, trying to break my door down. The most recent text from her is a long one claiming I'm a bad person for not responding to her text earlier, and that she's coming over to beat me up. For not doing so, she still had a key to the building still from when she used to live there. I get out of bed and nearly having a panic attack and try to decide what my next move should be. Should I open the door and calm her? Should I call the police? Should I just ignore her? I decide to open the door. She begins wailing on me, swinging her arms trying to hit me. She was smoking a cigarette and there were 3 cigarette butts on the ground next to her. Smoking indoors was prohibited in my apartment building. She was very obviously on some sort of drug. She kept screaming at me, telling me how awful I am for not responding to her text message, slurring her speech and losing her balance. I was somehow able to calm her down and I took her to the roof of the apartment building, which had a pretty nice little enclosed picnic table area. We sat beside one another. She was quiet now finally. She kept asking me how I could be such a jerk and that I need to explain myself. The look in her eyes was pure evil as she spoke to me in a calm demeanor now. I said to her, "Emily, I don't ever want to speak to you again after tonight. This whole scenario is absolutely insane. You need help. Let me walk you home." I take her home and return to my apartment to attempt sleeping, at which I do not succeed. A couple of days later, I return home from work and there is an envelope taped to my door. I open it and it's a handwritten letter from Emily apologizing and saying that I'm a beautiful human who doesn't deserve an evil person like her in their life. There was a literal candy bar attached to the envelope, one that I had never heard of that she always told me I needed to try. I never spoke to her again. From what Matt tells me, which, by the way, he always knew she was a problematic person, she's a heavy user of crack now and is working as a food runner in a restaurant nearby. This happened on Saturday. My girlfriend, Tess, my puppy, Jack, and I are all getting ready for a road trip. We're planning on meeting some friends at their house and then starting the trip from there. On our way to their house around 11 a.m., a white car with all tinted windows cuts us off and brake checks us close enough that I had to slam the brakes and swerve to avoid an accident. In the immediate fury, I honked and flipped the driver off. I wish I hadn't done this. Immediately, the driver rolls down his window and waves his hand over. He slows down to go back to the other lane so that our cars are parallel to one another. The driver is gesturing wildly and yelling at us while we continue driving down the avenue. I proceed to make gestures to calm down and then try to ignore him and continue driving. He continues driving next to us. Eventually, I try speeding up and he revs in front of me and tries brake checking me again. At this point, I swerve to the other lane and he again slows down to match my vehicle's speed. He is still gesturing and screaming while I try to ignore him. Suddenly, he reaches in his lap and I notice he is holding a glass bottle. He throws it and it shatters at the side of my vehicle. Tess is hysterical at this point and the pup had hidden under the passenger seat. I go into adrenaline mode and try turning into different streets as the chase ensues. He is following close behind when he throws another glass bottle that shatters against my back window. I tell Tess to call the police as we speed down a 2-lane street and up a hill. She calls 911 as I come to a stop at the light at the top of the hill. The guy chasing us slows down to a stop behind us. Suddenly, he hops out of his vehicle and in my rearview mirror I see him reach back into his car and grab something and puts it into his shorts. He begins walking towards the side of my car as the car in front of me drives away. I noped out of there, slammed the gas and turned into the next avenue. Within a minute, he has caught back up to us as I am now on speaker with with 911 explaining the situation and giving them the details of his car and appearance. Tess is crying as we speed down a busy avenue, weaving in between cars at 20 above the speed limit. I'm updating the 911 lady with where we are and she tells me to drive to the station. At the next red light he yells out audibly, "Do we have a problem? Don't flip me off." I'm trying to gesture that we do not have any problem. He's still trying to get me to get out of the car. The light is still red and he again hops out of his vehicle. I again floor it through the red and he continues chasing as I make way toward the police station. We're now accelerating and brake checking each other as he tries to drive off the road. I make gestures that he should continue following, hoping to get him to the station. About a block from the police, we get stuck in a busy intersection. There are many cars around as he again walks up to my car. This time I'm boxed in and Tess is panicking. I'm looking for any escape options to no avail. The drivers around us notice and many put their windows up and lock their doors. He comes right up to my window, slaps it with his palm and asks one more time, "Is there a problem?" I again say no. The 911 lady tells me to not engage over the phone speaker. He says good. He gets back into his car and then speeds away. 20 minutes into this horrible car chase experience, we end up meeting with the cops and they say that there was nothing they could do, even though I updated them with more details of his direction and where he was last. We calmed down and then we continued our road trip. So a 20-year-old female, lived in a shady apartment complex in an otherwise rich, suburban area for 3 years. This story is about a neighbor that I'll call Bob. A little backstory: me, 18 years old at the time, and my then 16-year-old sister used to babysit all the neighborhood kids. These kids considered us their friends, and it got to where they seemed to have a radar of when me and my sister went outside. They'd come out and talk to us, and we let them ride our skateboards and such in the parking lot. The kids were ages 8 to 13. So one day we were outside with them and we were joined by a stranger. He stood between us and our car, towering over us. He introduced himself and asked us to sign a petition he made up. We did, just being friendly. Then he asked us how old we were. I thought maybe he was a fellow teenager that looked older or that he was just awkward. So I told him I was 18, and the very next question was if I wanted to go out with him. In front of my mom and the other kid's mom, I awkwardly declined, but he continued talking about how he thought me and my sister were in middle school. Also, he was 28. Eventually, he wandered away to ask someone else to sign his petition. A few days later, he knocked at our door after asking neighbor for the address. He had a bag of what he said was chicken and wanted us to go eat it with him at the park. We declined because we both had schoolwork to do. He walked away and he was mumbling about how antisocial everyone was. Later, we look out our window and see him playing baseball with 2 girls. He kept physically moving their arms to different positions even though they shrugged away from him. Next day, one of the kids runs up to me. I'll call her Maddie. She's 8. She's got a new pair of Heelys and wanted help with them. I was holding her hand and guiding her along when Bob appears and says he can help better. Maddie says no, but he insists. He pushed me aside and reaches for Maddie, holding her tightly around the upper chest area. Her grandma was there too and flips out. He wanders away. The next day, Maddie's freaking out, saying Bob was just sitting on her porch when she left for school that morning. Her parents found out, and as they walked outside, he let himself in, and they said he went to their kitchen to make orange chicken. We later found out another neighbor had a similar story. Another time, we were helping a family move. They have a 2-year-old son. The garages are in a triangle shaped to the road, almost a roundabout. There's a flat patch of grass behind them. Well, here comes Bob to help us. He criticized the way we packed things and didn't help until our neighbor politely asked him to leave. Well, he left the garage, but instead of leaving, he asked the 2-year-old if he wanted to play. The kid said no, and it made him mad. He picked up the kid to play, and the kid slapped him. He asked the kid if he wanted to go behind the garages to play ball, so I go with him and guide the kid to his mom. The climax of the story is when me and my sister went on a walk with our 17-year-old friend and her other friend. Maddie found us and wanted to come along, so we are starting our walk when Bob comes out. He sees our friend and asks how old she is and how much she weighs because she's so skinny. He asks where we're going. My friend tells him we're going for ice cream on a girls trip. We didn't ask her to say that. He's like, "Oh man," and stomps away. We continue our walk, but halfway through we have a weird feeling. I look behind us and Bob is running towards us. He yells at us for hiding from him while also telling Maddie how pretty she is. An older neighbor sees this and asks him what's going on. He tells the man we're being mean and he needs to go write a song about us. He leaves, but we see him sitting at the park. Well, he saw us and again comes running. We stop and he asks which one of us is over 18. Maddie's dad is here at this point and tells him we aren't interested in him. He explodes, telling the dad to screw himself and that he's so rude. Maddie is crying and the neighbor who saw us before came to check on us since he saw Bob running. Bob goes inside, muttering to himself. For weeks we don't see him. A single dad and his 5-year-old daughter move in and we are introducing ourselves to to them. My mom kind of tips him off that there's someone in their building who is a little off, especially around Maddie. The dad says he's seen someone like that giving kids candy at the pool when the kids looked uncomfortable. Well, here comes Bob, as if on cue. He immediately tells the girl in front of her dad that she looks like a movie star and that she's so pretty. He asks to play with her, but the dad says no and they go inside. Turns out they're next door neighbors. We still didn't see him much, but other neighbors were telling us stories about him. There's a woman who's alone most of the day with her 2 kids under 5 who told us he watches her when she goes to and from her car. Also, Maddie's parent continued to see him watching her. Then one day we're again babysitting and here he comes. Only this time he's swinging nunchucks. Maddie screams and hides in our car. Bob strolls over with his nunchucks and starts talking to us all casual. Then his head cranes to look into the car and he says, "Where's Maddie?" We told him she wasn't here and he walked away. By then, most of the kids were afraid to go outside when they saw him. He had a habit of wandering around the complex. We could tell by his height and lanky gait. A few times we'd see Bob with his dad. Those times, neither of them glanced at us. Then one day he just stopped showing up. We'd see his dad and brother come in and out all the time, but never him. We only saw him again a year later, and it was only for one day near Christmas, and then he disappeared again. So I don't know what happened to him, but it was just one of our weird experiences with neighbors in the 3 years living there. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from my friend named Sarah asking if I wanted to meet her and another friend named Lisa at Dunkin' Donuts as we hadn't seen one another in a while. Dunkin' Donuts is a 15-minute walk from my house, so I decided I would walk. Besides, the weather was fine. I got to Dunkin' Donuts and found where Sarah and Lisa were sat, so I went to join them. As we were chatting, I noticed that my sister, Alina, was sat at a table in the corner of the room with her friend, Jess. For some context, my sister and her friend are both 18 years old. My sister still lives with my parents, whereas I live alone. I excused myself from the table and went over to Alina and Jess's table. They were sat at a table with 3 seats, so I went to sit down and said hey. They both jumped a little bit, but then looked more relieved than anything to see me. Immediately, Alina whispered to me, "Don't look now, but the guy in the blue shirt, I think he's following Jess and I." I glanced over and saw the middle-aged man sat at a table facing away from us. He's passed our table a good 5 times in the past 20 minutes to go to the bathroom, but he walks slower as he passes us, she continued. I told them that they were most likely being paranoid and that there was nothing to worry about, but for their peace of mind, I offered to leave with them so they wouldn't feel as worried. I walked back over to my table and explained the situation to Sarah and Lisa. Both of them laughed it off and assumed my sister to be paranoid. Literally about a minute later, I saw the man get up from his seat and walk towards the bathroom. My eyes followed him and sure enough, he walked extremely slow past Alina and Jess. In fact, it was almost comical how obviously slow he became. Both Alina and Jess looked in my direction and I nodded to show that I had seen him walk slower. About 5 minutes later, I went into the toilets. On my way, I passed Alina and Jess and told them I was ready to leave whenever they were. They both agreed that they were ready to leave now. I told them that I was just going to go to the bathroom and that we could leave after I had done my business. Alina had come in her car, so she was gonna give me a lift back. I went into the toilet stall, did said business, washed my hands. I was walking down the corridor back into the main eating area when Alina and Jess rushed into the corridor. I asked them what's up and they explained that another man had joined the strange creeper men and that the men were both pointing and staring at them, so they rightfully felt unsafe. We walked back into the eating area. I put my money on our table and explained to Lisa and Sarah that I was taking off and I would explain what was going on when I got home. We all got into Alina's car and left the creeps in the car's rearview mirror. After a 2-minute drive, we reached my house. Just then I remembered that I had been meaning to return something I had borrowed from my mother, so I asked if Alina could drive me to my parents' house as she was going there anyway. I jumped at the car to get what I needed when my phone rang. It was Alina. She explained that a car had driven past and had pulled into a driveway. She said the driver of the vehicle was the creep from Dunkin' Donuts. I looked out of my window and sure enough, there was a car which didn't belong to the owner of the house parked on their driveway. I got the girls into my house and locked the door. I instructed Alina to take a photo of the car and its license plate, and I told Jess to call 911 as she gave the operator more information than what I could. Alina took the photos and we sort of gathered around Jess as she was speaking to the operator. She had finished telling the story and I heard the operator assure us that the police would be at my house soon. A few minutes passed and there was a loud knock at the front door followed by a loud voice shouting, "It's the police." We all did a sigh of relief as I went to open the door. Jess told the operator that the police were here and she hung up. I was in the process of unlocking the door when I thought to look through the spy hole at the top of the door. I peered through and it wasn't a police officer, it was the same guy. I froze in fear and I didn't know what to say. We didn't call the police. I managed to shout back to the man through the door. Alina and Jess were both confused as to why I said this. "We had a call, sir." The man shouted back, "You have the wrong address." I yelled back and informed the girls that it was the creep at the door and not a police officer. Both were rightfully shocked and extremely scared, as was I. I was about to tell Jess to call the police again until I heard the sirens. "Sir, you have to let let me in." The man shouted again. This time I didn't answer. He was pounding on the door. His commands for me to let him in turned into begging and pleading. I heard the police car pull up and some commotion outside. An actual police officer knocked on the door and I let him in. Yes, I checked the spy hole first. The police officer took the man into custody while another police officer took Alina and Jess into the dining room for some brief questioning. I called my parents and Jess called hers. Both were here extremely quickly once we told them what had happened. The man was found with a kitchen knife on his person and some other weapons in his car. Who knows what could have happened if I hadn't looked through the spy hole first. Both my sister and her friend are fine, just shaken up after the whole incident. Back when I was 17 or 19, I worked at a small local bakery. There were less than 15 employees spread across all the night and day shifts, so we only had a few people working during the day. One of these people was Dave, the delivery driver. Dave immediately gave me an off vibe. He was in his mid-50s and way too friendly to a teenage girl, but the boss told me straight up that yes, he could be annoying, but no one worked harder than he did, so just ignore his antics. When I signed the paperwork, they never asked me to submit to a background check. In hindsight, that should have been red flag number 2. Over the course of the year or so that I worked with Dave, I tried very hard to ignore him. He was rarely outright creepy, but he was always just a bit too friendly. He would stick around long after his shift was over to talk to me and the other pastry chef on shift. He always wanted to lick the bowl after I made Rice Krispie treats. He would always stand in front of the racks of equipment or ingredients, just enough that sometimes my hand would brush him while reaching for something. He always stood just a little too close. He was constantly asking me about my life, what I liked, what I did for fun, if I had a boyfriend, almost daily. He would tell me how a nice girl like me should have a boyfriend, how maybe a boyfriend would be good for me. I let this slide because sometimes older people can say things that were meant differently in their time. Then it was concert invites. Every other week he had tickets to one concert or another. Once he figured out my genre of music, it was almost exclusively tickets to bands I desperately wanted to see. But I also knew I should not go anywhere with him. I don't like to associate with coworkers outside of work anyway, and I had seen way too many red flags about Dave to trust him for even a second. My birthday came. He brought me a t-shirt. It was 2 sizes too small. He told me to try it on. I said no. He told me to try it on after work and text him a photo. He gave me his number. He asked for mine. I said no. He asked for the other pastry chef for my number. She had my back and refused as well. He also brought me 2 tickets to a band I'd been wanting to see. VIP section, 21+-year-old only. He said he could get me in, but I had to go with him and him alone. I refused. He told me he could get me booze. I declined. For months and months this continued. I brought it up to one of my bosses, but they laughed it off as classic Dave. When he wanted a hug on his birthday and hugged me without my consent. That's Dave for you. Offering to get me booze or pot? Ah, Dave, you scamp. When he pulled up his shirt and showed me his abdominal scar from a snowboarding accident, well, that's just Dave. No respect for boundaries, but a good worker. I seriously considered having one of my male friends come in under the guise of being my boyfriend just to placate Dave. I was repulsed by him, but he hadn't really done anything to classify himself as a predator. Besides asking for my number, he had never tried to harass me outside of work hours. And besides the odd hug or two that I was too afraid/shy to refuse, he hadn't gotten super physical. Then one day, Dave was gone. His name disappeared from the employee roster. My boss asked to see me in the office. She informed me that Dave was no longer employed at their business. Dave had been fired. Dave was fired because Dave was a convicted offender. Davey here had 2 counts of assault and 1 count of kidnapping a minor from the mid-90s, about the time I was born actually. They had never background checked him, and when they contacted a friend at the police department, they found out that Dave had been lying on lots of paperwork, hiding the fact that he was a convicted felon and not notifying anyone when he moved. Once they brought this information to the police department's attention, they had a few more charges to add. They found out because apparently he had been stalking and harassing one of the clients he delivered to, showing up at her home when he should not have known where she lived. After his termination, Dave showed up to work one day. He had a weapon, but I never found out what he had. They told him to leave or the police would be called. He ended up leaving in handcuffs. I am so thankful I wasn't there that day. Another little tidbit, the police officer my bosses knew had been in the PD for a while and knew one of the officers who had arrested Dave in the 90s. That abdominal scar was from a run-in with the cops and he got injured trying to climb over a fence. That was a few years ago, but sometimes I still think about how badly things could have gotten had I gone to even one of those concerts with him. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. This happened when I was a bartender about 4 years ago, but I think about it often and has changed the way I operate throughout life. I now refuse to go to any store alone after midnight. For the story's sake, I will tell you that I was 25 and a blonde at the time. On a busy Friday night, I was bartending with the bar manager and he had noticed that they were very low on some bar necessities after the dinner rush. Lemons, limes, bitters, that kind of thing. So I was sent out to go to a 24-hour grocery store down the road to pick up the odds and ends that we would require to get us through the weekend. I picked up everything that was asked for me without trouble at the store, until I got to the liquor aisle. There were two country-looking guys that were probably around my age in the aisle and they were staring at me and whispering to each other in a way that made me uncomfortable, as I assumed they were making comments about me. All pretty innocent so far. Before they could approach me, I grabbed what I needed very quickly and power walked to the self-checkout. I really booked it out of there because when you're a bartender, it's kind of like you are on stage and are required to be charming and interact with people that you otherwise absolutely wouldn't be able to tolerate unless you're getting paid to, thus why I am not a bartender anymore. I get to the self-checkout and the two guys are on me. I'm scanning my stuff and they use the scanning station next to me. I get a better look at them now that they are right next to me. One is taller, muscular, and average looking. The other is shorter and more plump. They both looked dirty and their eyes were completely bloodshot, not sure if they were high on something or had already been drinking for a while. They continued to stare at me and our eyes awkwardly met, so I did just a polite smile to them. The taller one starts trying to talk to me. Hey, looks like you're ready to party, huh? I replied with something like, yeah, something like that. It's not for me though. They walk closer to me and ignore their responsibility to scan their items. Oh, must be for your boyfriend, huh? I flash a polite smile again and roll my eyes slightly, like this is your hint that I'm not interested. The taller one continues to try to talk to me. You could come hang out with us tonight. We could show you a real good time if you know what I mean. I reply with, no thanks, I'm good. I have plans already. Well, the tall one starts to get upset that his moves aren't working like he hoped and starts using a more threatening tone and moves very close to me, like 2 inches away, but I ignore him, staying focused on the scanner. I don't think he had showered in a few days by the smell of him. He gets a little louder and says, I see how it is. You probably only screw doctors and rich men like that. You think you're too good for us. We can show you that you aren't. We can teach you a lesson. Now, I'm not sure in what context he meant, but it definitely wasn't good. Still not looking at him, I turn away so my body is blocking his view of my purse, which I set on the scanner to grab my 4-inch pocket knife out and slide it up my jacket sleeve in case I need to protect myself, acting like I am searching for my wallet. I do this, however, in view of the self-scan worker standing at our podium and look at her with wide eyes trying to communicate that I do not feel safe and I might need help. I turn back to the machine and slide my credit card to pay, while the creepy and hostile guys are practically standing on top of me. The machine malfunctions and starts beeping. The lady worker comes over immediately, and the guys standing next to me change their expressions from, I am planning to torture you for a couple of days and toss your body in a creek, to, just your friendly good old country boys making polite conversation over here. They actually try to act like I knew them and we were friends so the worker wouldn't be alerted to their ill intentions. They tried joking with the workers saying I was stealing something, and that's why the machine went off. The worker was definitely not buying it. She was a 6+ foot tall woman with some muscle on her, by the way. I wouldn't mess with her on my best day. Anyways, she presses a few buttons on the screen, shooting the guys a very unimpressed look when they were trying to act charming, and cancels the order completely. She turns to me and says, I am sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. This machine seems to not be working correctly. Why don't you gather your things and I will bring you up at an actual register. She puts her hand on my back and gives me a wide-eyed look, like I gave her a minute earlier, letting me know that she sees I am in danger. I pick up my things to follow her to a register that is near the security office. The guys linger around the self-scan, still glaring at me, and eventually complete their purchase, but stand at the exit assuming they are waiting for me. I felt like I would be walking to my death if I made my exit in that moment. The worker keeps a close eye on the guys and scans my items. As she's scanning, she tells me that there wasn't really anything wrong with the machine I was using. It just misread my credit card. She said, I had a bad feeling about those guys from the moment they walked in, and I then saw them getting aggressive towards you. I already rang security to be ready to walk out to the parking lot and make sure you left safely when you were ready to leave. Then I saw you take that knife out and put it up your sleeve, getting ready to protect yourself. As much as I'd like to see you show them they picked the wrong chick to mess with, I'm glad I was able to pull you aside and make sure you are safe. I see them waiting by the door for you. I'll just keep pressing buttons on the screen and act like I'm having trouble with your order until they give up and go outside. Our security officer and I are both still going to escort you to your vehicle when you leave. I thought to myself, this woman seriously deserves a raise. I thanked her over and over again and told her what they said to me, and I was getting afraid because I don't know what these guys are capable of. As I'm talking to her, my bar manager calls me to see what's taking so long. I explained what was happening and he was obviously very concerned and ready to come up there himself. By the time I hang up, the guys had given up and walked out to the parking lot. The worker said to give it another few minutes because she had a feeling they may still be in the parking lot waiting for me to walk out and see which vehicle was mine so they could follow me. My instant thought was, no way, they have to be gone by now. I was wrong. The worker and security guard escort me out, and as it was after midnight, you can imagine how empty the parking lot was. Towards the back of the lot, there sat an old big pickup truck running with the lights on pointed towards the store. It was a huge parking lot, and it wouldn't have made sense for them to initially park like that, so I'm assuming they moved the truck to sit that way so they had a full view of when I exited the store to go to my vehicle. It was like being stalked by very hungry lions. When I unlocked my car and they saw that me, the worker, and the guard were looking directly at them and that I wasn't getting in my car until we watched them leave, they then peeled out of the parking lot. I mean, they seriously did a burnout to establish that they were pissed and trying to intimidate us or something. I thanked the worker and the guard over and over again, as I am certain they had just saved my life, or at least saved me from having to live with whatever those guys were planning on doing to me. I did write a long letter to the store manager and to their corporate location describing how their employees protected me and how grateful I was. I really hope that earned her a promotion, bonus, or raise. She didn't know me at all and was ready to protect me, which really isn't her job, but she did it anyways. Needless to say, I do not go late night shopping by myself anymore. Never will again. This is my brother's girlfriend's story. She doesn't have a Reddit account, but I've told her about this subreddit and she wanted to share her story because it's creepy, but also a good lesson to learn from. I go to a school in a big city that is one of the least safe cities in the US. I chose this school for nursing and definitely not for the location. I live in a row house off the campus with 4 other girls. Cheaper and nicer than dorms, or so we thought. I guess you get what you pay for. We're all sophomores in college. As you would guess, we go out and drink, come back to do things we don't remember. We had just started our rent in August. 3 floors, plus a basement which was padlocked by the owners. Understandable, we would definitely have parties down there to avoid immediate cleanup. The house was great, amazing location to the school and work. I am a CNA who works odd hours, important for later. It was not expensive, and in good condition. I had never lived with that many people before, just one roommate, so before we definitely knew if one of us had misplaced or changed something. I started to notice my snacks were either half gone or completely gone. I was getting annoyed, but a house with many people, it's too much work to go and figure out who ate what, so I ignored it. Slowly, we started making comments about someone eating our food, but passive aggressively. We all just let it go because none of us want a whole house fight. I work until about 11 in the NICU. I get home at about 11:30 mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pants left out or snack wrappers around. I thought it was odd cause none of my roommates had done that before, but just thought, oh, they probably drank a bottle of wine then went to bed and forgot all about this. Again, my roommates started making comments. This time we started to ask because it was getting annoying that all of our food would disappear and things being left out. I knew it was one of them, but no one wants to admit that they ate someone else's snacks in college. We chalked it up to the girl who always smokes and eats her weight in food. She swore it wasn't her. This went on for about 2 months. It got more obvious that someone was clearly taking everyone's food. It definitely had to be the girl that always smokes. I see her eat her whole snack pantry in a night. Come to find out it was not her. One night at work, I was about to get off, but a situation happened and I ended up leaving about 12:30. I took the bus home. I got home and was about to collapse. I wanted to go to bed ASAP. I walked in the front door and the stairs are directly in front of you. You can also see down the side into the kitchen. I walked in and saw someone in the kitchen but was way too tired to say hi. I thought it could end in like a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I went straight upstairs. When I got to the second floor, I noticed all of my roommates' doors were closed, which always means they're either all in their room for the night or asleep. I got a weird feeling, just something that made it click. I texted our house group chat asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and they said the other 2 had been asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911 but didn't press call. I crept into my roommate's room across the hall. Thankfully, she didn't have her door locked. I whispered telling her I think someone is in the house. She gave me the widest eyes ever and almost looked like she was going to cry. She didn't suspect anything like I had, but for reference, there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down only weeks earlier by an intruder. She mouthed to make the call. The whole time we were dead silent. We didn't hear anything at all. I was starting to think I was seeing things after such a long day at work and was regretting that I dialed, thinking I'm going to look like an idiot when they show up and I was just exhausted and dreaming. We explained what's going on and they said that they will send someone ASAP. That actually does mean right away since it is a big and dangerous city. The police showed up and I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed it was them, so I did. The police come in and look around. I'm thinking, I look so dumb right now. They ask if there are any other floors. We tell them technically the basement, but it's padlocked, so not really. They check the basement just in case, and well, they were right. A man had been living in the padlocked basement. The lock was pulled off the hinges hinges and just kind of propped against the wall. We never looked at that though, we rarely went out back. The guy had taken a comforter out of the hall closet and had a mattress from somewhere in his clothes. He was the one moving and eating all of our stuff. He would come out in the middle of the night and do it. He started getting more comfortable. I'm not sure if he was drugged out and forgot to clean his tracks or if he didn't really care. Me and my roommates have pretty consistent schedules during the week, probably letting him think that any time after about 12 was good to come out. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that's what freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment and we had no idea. A little backstory, when I was 19, I lived with my mom in a ranch-style house on a road that backed up to a large field. On the other side was the main highway. About a half mile down from me was a loony farmer, and about a mile on the other side of me was pretty much a drug house. I guess someone used to live there, but it was run down. I will say that they were pretty quiet. Other than those two houses, we were isolated. At the time, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. One of my classes ended at 10:30 p.m. I often wouldn't get home that day of the week until about 11:15ish. I was driving home one night and I noticed some guy walking down the road. He had a yellow shirt and track pants. I remember his outfit because it was weird. It wasn't weird to see people walking down my road because of the whole drug house thing, but I instinctively looked over at him when I drove past. He turned and smiled and waved, which freaked me out. So I speed the half mile home and pull into the driveway, weirded out. I made sure all the doors and windows were secure and then sat on the couch to be a paranoid freak and wait to make sure the dude walked past my house. Except he didn't, and there was another guy with him, dressed in darker clothes. They actually walked up my driveway and started playing around with my car, testing the handles and stuff. In my hurry, I forgot to grab my phone from my car, so I was kind of worried that's what they were after until the guy in yellow started approaching my door. I'm freaking out, so I go and wake my mom up. She's bleary and I'm trying to explain the situation when we both hear the doorknob turn very slowly. Good thing it was deadbolted. She got out of bed, walked to the door, and then yellow shirt knocked. I perched up on the couch so I could get a good look at him and his friend, still in the driveway. The porch light was on because of the sensor. Yeah, my mom said, "You dropped your wallet." I told my mom that I had my wallet, it was in my purse. So she calmly told him that she had her wallet and it was too late to be knocking on people's doors. I remember perfectly what he said next, even though this was about 6 years ago. Okay, I'm not a bad guy, just so you know. We were all pretty still. No one moved, not even the guy at the door. Not even when the porch light went off. Then he tried the handle again. My mom told me to call the cops so she could get the gun and I told her I didn't have my phone. So she walked to the kitchen to grab hers from the charger. She handed me the phone and walked to the bathroom. I stared out of the window into the backyard. Then she went to her room to grab her Ruger. I was talking to the cops and explaining the situation all while watching the two guys. Explaining that they were two suspicious guys at our door when my mom came back out and said, "One in our backyard too," which explained why she had looked out the bathroom window. She glimpsed him from the kitchen and went to get a more discreet look. My mom walked back over to the door with her gun and loudly said, "If he tries the handle again, I'm just going to open the door and shoot him." I don't know why she said that instead of waiting for the cops to arrive, but the guys took off down the road. I told her and she rushed to the bathroom, where the guy apparently in the backyard saw his friends running down the road and sprinted off too. They were going in the direction of the drug house. The cops searched our house and our yard and went to the drug house, where they found 5 dudes hanging around. One was the yellow shirt guy and I'm assuming his friends were with him. They did get arrested and nothing weird like that ever happened again, but I was on edge for a while. I still make sure the doors are locked at all times every day, even though I live in a much nicer area now. My fiance and I threw a dinner party one time to celebrate his mom completing chemo. I hired a caterer. We were expecting 25 friends and family, so it was more than the kitchenette of our single-story ranch house could handle. We'd also only just moved in, so didn't have a lot of cooking staples. The caterer said he'd bring everything 75% done, but he needed to finish off some dishes in our kitchen. I told him that was fine as long as he was finished by 5, because the kitchen is centrally located and we'd prefer everyone be finished before the guests arrive due to the intimate nature of the occasion. He said that would be fine. He arrives as scheduled at 12 p.m. We gave him until 5 and the guests aren't even arriving until 6, so it's plenty of time. He smelled bad. It was more than a sweat smell though. It smelled like a sun-baked diaper, and that made me uneasy because he was going to be preparing food for sick prior and young kids. I just made sure he washed his hands and then left him to his own devices, worrying I was being presumptuous. Throughout the entire process, he keeps pulling me aside to ask me questions and have me taste things. I was super busy because my husband had to work during the day and pick up up the surprise guest right after, so setting up the deck, decorating, putting together the slideshow equipment, coordinating the surprise guest, we flew in her sister and I had to make sure she got an Uber at the airport and her hotel had worked out, etc., and just a million other little details. So every 10 minutes being asked things like, do you prefer this with paprika or without? With this, fine, whatever you think. Tasted to be sure was getting old. When he was still there at 5:45, after 2 gentle reminders, I flat out told him I needed him completely out by 6 no matter what. He apologized and said there had been a delay because our oven wouldn't stay up to temperature. I never had a problem with our oven, but I figured he's the professional, maybe it was a subtle problem. A little before 6 rolls around, a few of our friends start trickling in. I decide to tell him whatever's done is done and whatever isn't he should just put in the fridge, but he's nowhere to be found. I go out on the deck to ask my friends if they'd seen him and he's out there, alcoholic beverage in hand, out of his chef whites and now in a t-shirt and jeans, mingling with my friends. I walked out just in time for him to introduce himself to my cousin-in-law as a good friend of mine. Nope, too weird for me. I met him in person for the first time barely 6 hours ago. I told him he needed to leave, now. So he goes inside and gets his bag and makes a beeline for my bedroom. I'm taken aback. I say, excuse me, where are you going? And he says, to change. So first of all, we have a guest bathroom clearly visible. Second, why can't he wear a t-shirt and jeans home? I tell him I'm not comfortable with him going to my room, but he insisted to only be a second and goes in and shuts and locks the door. I couldn't even get a word out before he went in and I felt helpless. I was going outside to ask one of my friends to help me usher him out, but at that point my fiance got there with my aunt-in-law. I had to explain the situation to him, nearly in tears at this point, and he was like, what? He went in the bedroom? Why? So he pounded on the door, and the caterer came out, still in a t-shirt and jeans, and my fiance said, you shouldn't be in there, you need to leave. And the caterer said, excuse me, but this is not your house. It is not up to you to decide. And my 6'4", 260-pound fiance tells him, yes, actually, it is his house, and puts a hand on his back and guides him to the door. The caterer says, I thought she lived here, referencing me, and he says, yes, my fiance lives here with me. And the caterer goes nuts. He turns to me and screams, you lied to me. I have no clue what he's talking about. He starts yelling about how I led him on and calling me more names. I don't know who he thought the man in the pictures with me around the house was. So my fiance says, oh no, you won't talk that way in my house. Find the door. And the caterer goes in the kitchen and starts throwing the trays of food out of the refrigerator and onto the floor. At that point my fiance realized 2 of his brothers, both currently offensive linemen at the college level, had come in and were on the deck. He signaled to them and they came inside and he basically said, this guy's harassing my fiance. They helped my fiance out. The party then went on as planned, but I insisted we just order pizza and throw out all the food he made. My fiance and friends kept saying, isn't that a bit much, but I was insistent. We went out late drinking with his brothers and got home around 3:30 a.m. and passed out in our room. At around 5 a.m. I was woken up to the sound of the door opening. I figure either we forgot to lock the door in our drunken stupor and it blew open, or one of his family forgot their keys or something in the house and didn't want to wake us. His parents and his local brother have a key, but his parents never ever let themselves in when they know we're home, and his brother had even more than we did and was definitely not awake and driving around at 5 a.m. It wasn't nearly windy enough for the door to have blown open. It had been tranquil all night. So I wake up my fiance and whisper, someone just came in the house, and he said the same thing. Probably my brother left his wallet or something. I figure I'm being paranoid and try to put it to rest when I hear a loud crash sound. With that, my fiance was up and on his feet in one movement. He told me to lock myself in the closet and call 911 while he went and looked around. As I was pulling out my phone, we hear in that distinct accent, hello, and I realize it's just this insane caterer. I'm not worried about this caterer physically overpowering my fiance, or me for that matter, so I charge right out there. The caterer is shirtless and clearly on something. He's taking the pictures that are of just me off the wall and holding several in his arms already. He lunges toward me when he sees me. My fiance gets between me and him and I call 911. My fiance tells him cops have been called and it is in his best interest to get off the property. The caterer says, no, I have to make sure your fiance is okay. And I say, what? Why wouldn't I be okay? And my fiance rightfully says not to engage with him and feed into it. My fiance stays between me and him while I climb out a window. He watches as the caterer throws photos of us on the floor. My fiance didn't want to subdue or touch him in any way, so the caterer couldn't make any assault claims. He's begun to destroy our kitchen at this point, and when the cops come in, he has a butcher knife. My fiance considered going for the gun safe when he first got the knife, since we live in a stand your ground state, but he decided the situation was hectic enough without introducing a firearm. The caterer doesn't obey the police's orders to drop his weapon, and he says he isn't leaving without me, so they tase him. It's lucky for him he only got tased and he didn't antagonize my husband into squashing him. As he's let out in cuffs, he's shouting how he and I are in love. He continues on this tirade the entire time police are reading him his rights. writes, "The police ask us to do an inventory of the house and see if anything's missing or damaged besides what we witnessed him do. We go around and there's nothing, but then I remember he was in our room yesterday and he went through the room. All of my underwear from the dirty laundry hamper were gone. We were so freaked out in the aftermath that we replaced all of our kitchenware, toothbrushes, sent our sheets to be professionally cleaned, and had a cleaning crew do a deep clean on the whole house. So glad we decided not to serve the food to our guest and my fiance's medically fragile mother. He sent me a letter from prison that thankfully my husband intercepted, because I was still recovering from the whole thing. We gave it to the police who helped us get issued a no contact order. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison." This happened in May of 2015 in California, which will help those of you who are familiar. I had graduated college in June of 2014, moved back into my old hometown, and started a consulting company with my boyfriend, which is going very well. We had just finished a contract in the Bay Area and were beginning a new one about 8 hours south in Torrance. He moved down there first to start setting up, while I took care of loose ends at our closing contract before moving down to meet him. The day comes and I pack my car and head down south to I-5. For the uninitiated, it's a straight highway with little in the way of scenery aside from the occasional strip mall, and its monotony has a reputation for putting drivers to sleep at the wheel. I pass a strip mall with gas and a fast food joint and decide to fill my car and my stomach. I go to park in the food venue's parking lot, but it's completely full, so I park across the street at a hotel, which at the time I didn't think anything of. I go inside and eat my meal, then cross the street to get back to my car. I'm well into the hotel parking lot when a pickup truck pulls down the aisle and cuts off my path and stops, with the passenger side facing me. The driver is alone and a clean-cut white male in his mid-30s. I don't remember anything about him except that he looked very generic and buttoned up. The way he pulled in front of me to block my path didn't initially set off alarm bells, as he has done it pretty organically. He rolls down the window and the dialogue follows. "Excuse me, miss, but could you please tell me where the grocery store in town is? I'm sorry, I'm not from here, so I couldn't say." "Oh, where are you from?" Good question, I don't know, not here though." I didn't say that to be rude. I had just moved through so many cities at that point and was on my way to a new one. I wasn't sure how to answer. He laughs and makes a joke, then asks me where I'm headed. I mentioned that I'm moving. I will say he was very charismatic, and at this point I just think he's trying to flirt with me, and if I hadn't been so exhausted or in a relationship, on another date it might have worked. He makes another comment about how unpleasant moving can be, and then gives a warm chuckle and extends his hand to shake mine and goes, "Well, I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm Scott." If you recall, the truck is in front of me with the passenger side facing me. I actually take a step forward to grab his hand and then got the delayed response of every alarm bell that should have gone off earlier. I'm in a hotel parking lot. He asked me a question that establishes I don't know where I am, another question that establishes I'm alone, and another question that establishes I'm not expected at my destination for many more hours. The thing that connected all these synapses, when he extended his hand, he didn't make even the faintest effort to make it accessible to me. He didn't lean over the seat or move toward me in any way. His hand was hovering comfortably over the center console, waiting for me to grasp it, which in order to do I would have to lean well into the car. Again, I had already taken a step toward him and begun to raise my hand to take his when the sirens went off. I rocked backwards back to where I was standing, and I just remember looking in his eyes what felt like forever, feeling everything click into place while also half convinced my imagination was just running wild. His hand still waiting, I lowered mine and felt my eyes slightly narrow with suspicion, and slowly said, "I'm going to walk away from your car now, Scott." Boom. Truck burns rubber with thick gray smoke as the guy guns it out of the hotel lot at 100 miles per hour. He must have floored it. Regrettably smart on his end, because I didn't have the license number or anything to offer the police. In the immediate minutes following the event, I felt relieved but hadn't really processed the full weight of what happened. Unfortunately for me, I had many more hours to think back and analyze the whole interaction to shreds. The car was somewhat lifted. There could have easily been another person or even 2 to 3 other people hiding inside. I still get creeped out about thinking how close I came to taking his hand, and how fortunate I was that I didn't allow my reaction to be driven by manners, as criminals often take advantage of. This happened when I was in high school long ago. My mom just recently found the paperwork about it when she cleaned out her office upon retiring from the police department. I remember being upset and scared when it happened, but reading the details as an adult, it sounded even worse than I remembered. I was a 17-year-old female working at a flower and gift shop. It's nighttime. A man comes in, short, overweight, balding, and 40 years old. He tells me about how he needs an apology gift for his girlfriend, so I offer a bouquet. Obviously, it's a flower shop. He says she doesn't like flowers because they die. This is the first weird thing, as he came into a flower shop. Then he goes into detail about how he hit her and asks me if I think it was the right thing to do so. This was long ago, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, not if you want her to continue being your girlfriend. He then tells me what a great job I'm doing and asks me when I get off work. I dodge answering and he leaves. Nothing for 6 months. Then right before Valentine's Day, he walks in the door 1 minute before close. It was dark, and from the outside it looked like I was working alone as my coworker, about a 40-year-old female, was in the bathroom. Instinctively, it felt like a predator had just entered the room. You know when something isn't right, and everything felt not right. I then noticed he has a tarnished revolver tucked into the front of his windbreaker, which is halfway unzipped. It was obvious he wanted it seen. I quickly scribbled a note to my coworker that said he has a gun and handed it to her when she came out of the bathroom. She calmly walked to the phone and looked at me, wordlessly asking if she could call the cops. I shook my head no, as I felt like it would escalate the situation. God forbid he heard the police coming and took us hostage or something. I was just going to try and act as calm and normal as I could and hopefully not tip the situation into something more dangerous. He spends 15 minutes wandering around what was a fairly small shop. In retrospect, he was probably waiting to see if my coworker would leave, as it was now well past closing. Finally, he places an order for pickup on Valentine's Day, which gives me his name and info, which I'm going to for sure file with the police report. He buys a card and pulls out a wad of $100 bills, which he slowly thumbs through as though looking for the right one with which to pay for his $40 order. I ask him if he wants a bag, as it wouldn't be very inconspicuous if he just showed up at home with the Valentine's card. He replies, "No, I didn't feel like being inconspicuous tonight," which seemed like an obvious reference to the gun hanging out of his coat. He leaves. We quickly lock the door and watch him sit in his truck outside. We were not about to exit the shop until he was gone. Finally, he pulls out of his parking spot and moves to another spot further away and continues to just sit there. I don't know how long we waited, but he finally left. I called my mom crying. She called the police, who came to the shop the next day to take a report. I told my best friend at the time what happened. She told her mother. Her mother happened to work with the man and informed security at her job. She said he was very weird, creepy, and liked to talk about weapons a lot. Security at his job, it's a large company with government contracts and things having to do with tech and security, pulled him into the office and questioned him about it. He claimed it was a glove in his pocket, not a revolver. The police were pissed that this company made contact with him about it before they did, and he successfully dodged the cops' multiple calls and visits to his apartment. My mom, much to my teen fury at the time, made me quit my job, which was devastating as I loved it there. In retrospect, totally the right call. I never saw him again. Some backstory before I begin. These events started when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, 2002 to 2003-ish, and ended during the fall of 2015. I'm a 21-year-old female living in Canada. The RCMP are involved in the story, which stands for Royal Canadian Mounted Police. When I was in elementary school, I was friends with a girl named Jessica. We had a group of 5 or 6 girls that we always played with. Jessica's parents were divorced, and I often went over to her dad's house after school because they had a trampoline and a slide. Her dad was a totally normal dude. His name was Richard and he held a job as a pilot, which is definitely a job that requires mental stability. Jessica came over to my house as well, and her dad would always come pick her up after the play date, so he was familiar with where I lived. And I think 2nd or 3rd grade, Jessica moved away to live with her mom. I didn't fully understand what was going on as a child, and I still don't know what happened, but something had gone wrong with her father. We didn't hear much from Jessica, but around her birthday the following year, Richard invited our group of girls over for a surprise birthday party. We arrived at the party and we were waiting for Jessica so we could surprise her, but Jessica never showed up. We were just hanging out with her dad for a while. As a child, this didn't seem as weird as it does to me now. When our parents picked us up, we obviously told them what happened, and we didn't hang out with Jessica or Richard again. After that, some of the girls started receiving presents from Richard at their homes. I never received them, but my mother told me about it years later. The presents usually consisted of cheap jewelry and notes. I have no idea what the notes said, but I'm not sure if I want to. After this, Richard goes away. My mom later told me he was in a mental institution. Years go by, I completely forget about the whole situation. Then, in the winter of 2013, I was out of town for a cheer competition. I was scrolling through Facebook one night when all of a sudden a new group chat popped up with 5 girls from my elementary school. I had not kept in touch with any of them, so this was weird. The chat was about how they had received messages from Richard on Facebook. I checked the other folder of my Facebook messages, and sure enough, I had some too. I had a variety of messages that did not make a lot of sense, including some strange poems. Many of the messages were descriptions of dreams he had about me. Though some of them were nonsense, others were understandable enough to come across as violently threatening. I don't feel comfortable sharing some of the more explicit messages, but here are a couple of the shorter and less scary messages. Hi little girl from not long ago, pristine of pristineness, I want you, I want you, I want you. We're gonna have planets to go to someday provided you don't melt them first. I'm so proud of you, stay happy, and I haven't found a way to keep you all off my mind. I clicked on Richard's Facebook profile and his whole profile was dedicated to his 5 girls. He didn't have any friends added, so clearly nobody had seen it. Unfortunately, we didn't have very good security settings on Facebook. He had saved dozens of photos of us and then reposted them with nonsensical and inappropriate captions. The captions ranged from essays about his love for us to a one-sentence caption that simply said, "She is so ugly." Here are some of the shorter photo captions. Emily, hopefully and not too soon I'm gonna find out your address and I'm gonna show up as a man that knocks on your front doorstep and bite your bottom lip off before you can say a word. Kiara, because of my initial euphoria turns into sucking depression when I realize that there is nothing I can do about anything beside you because you're inside me and I can't get you out of my mind. I love you so much. Melissa, can I paint your picture? I want to lift you around to see how heavy you are and we'll go for a drive on Hollywood Drive with the windows rolled down so we can get a crystal clear view. We were all freshly 18 at the time and didn't know what to do, so our moms contacted the RCMP. They told us not to block Richard on Facebook, but not to reply as the messages could be used as evidence. He continued to send us messages every single day, and we shared the screenshots with each other in the group chat and sent them off to the RCMP. He had several different Facebook accounts that were all variations of his name, along with one randomly named Esteban. One of the girls got in touch with Jessica to find out if she still had contact with her father. She only saw him on supervised visits every once in a while. She was very embarrassed and apologized a lot. She was a super sweet girl and obviously none of us were upset at her in any way. Eventually, Richard was charged with 5 counts of criminal harassment. He pled guilty and went to jail for around 5 months. When he got out, there was still a no contact order in place, meaning that he could not contact any of us girls or come within a certain radius of our homes. He was not allowed to use the internet either. I'm not sure how all of this works, but this is what the constable handling the case told me. However, not surprisingly, he started contacting us on Facebook again. He went back to jail for breaching his probation. It was the summer of 2015 and he got out again. I started receiving more messages. I immediately wrote on the group chat to see if the other girls had gotten anything. They hadn't. It was just me. I immediately contacted the police. It seems they had forgotten to include my name on the no contact order. He knew not to contact the other girls, but thought it was still safe for him to contact me. This time things got worse. I had just started working at a new job, and being the idiot that I am, I had my workplace public on my Facebook profile. One day I came into work and there was a package waiting for me. I was obviously confused because I would never order something to be delivered to my work. I opened it up with my managers and there was weed inside along with a disc with encryption software on it. He had mailed me weed to my work. I knew immediately that this was him, and awkwardly explained the situation to my managers who thought it was hilarious. The security in my office tower was alerted and given a photo of him. They began walking me to my bus stop after my shifts. It was scary knowing that he knew where I worked. At this point, I hadn't seen Richard in years, but it was clear that he was mentally unwell. I had absolutely no idea what he was capable of or what his motives were. The RCMP did not seem to take this case very seriously, and they moved very slowly, passing the case around to various officers. Meanwhile, I was terrified. I could hardly walk down my street at night without freaking out. Every time somebody knocked on my door while I was home alone, I would drop whatever I was doing and hide under the kitchen counters. I had not moved since I was a child, so it was very possible that he remembered where I lived. The packages kept coming. I received more weed in several different forms, including cookies, what appeared to be cocaine, and a key to his apartment along with some miscellaneous items. I opened all the packages at the police station. One of the packages included a USB stick with a bunch of audio recordings on them, but I decided it was better for me not to listen to them. The return of the packages was to a random PO box in another city that did not belong to Richard, and no fingerprints were found on the packages. During all of this, the Facebook messages remained constant. Luckily, in one of the messages he informed me that he had sent me drugs and the key along with his home address. This confirmed that the packages were from him. He was charged again. I received a subpoena in the mail to appear as a witness in court. However, he once again pled guilty and I never got to go to court. I was actually a bit disappointed as I thought seeing him in person would provide me with some sort of closure. He is still locked up somewhere as I am writing this, but I still get scared walking at night or when somebody knocks on the door. The police provided me zero information on where he was being held or when he would be released. I feel like I am just waiting for the day that he will contact me again. I just hope that he never does. I had just moved out of a share house in the suburbs and into my own one-bedroom apartment in the city. I'm a male and at the time was around 25 years old. My apartment, while old and small, was located about 500 meters from one of the most popular night spots in the inner city. As I was in my mid-20s and out on my own, this was the perfect place for me. This was because my friends and I were quite social and would frequent bars and nightclubs in the city, and the taxi fares were starting to add up. Also, this new apartment was close to my work, so it made sense. I got settled in right away and invited my friends over for pre-drinks before hitting the clubs. Due to the limited space in the apartment, this meant that some friends were inside and some were drinking on the walkway just out front. We had the music up and I just started drinking, but between songs, I could hear the couple next door arguing. Now, the apartment was old and bad, which meant thin walls too, so I pressed an ear to the wall in order to listen in. I hadn't met any of my new neighbors at this time, as I didn't take long to move in and I didn't really see anyone during. I was curious. Judging from what I could determine while eavesdropping, they were a gay couple in their early 30s. One of the men was yelling at the other to go next door and tell us to keep it down. The other was arguing that it was just a housewarming and to let it go for the night. Since I didn't want to cause trouble, I marshaled everyone outside to start making our way to the nightclubs, leaving my new neighbors in peace. Later that night, I came home alone as I was tired from the move. I decided to let my friends carry on partying without me. I arrived at my door and proceeded to fumble around for my keys when I looked up to see a man standing in the walkway in front of the next apartment smoking a cigarette. He was tall and thin with brown oily hair. I noticed that he also had a cut lip and a faded but still visible black eye. I said, "Sorry about the noise earlier," correctly assuming he was my neighbor. He replied, "Nah, you're alright man. I'm Chris by the way." I shook his hand. I noticed his knuckles were red and a little bit scratched up, so I knew something was off. I apologized for the noise and said, "I hope I didn't cause any trouble for you." He withdrew his hand and with a soft but cracking voice said, "Nah, that's okay. Rick just gets a bit cranky sometimes. I'm used to it." With that, I finished off the conversation and told Chris that I'd see him later. It was about 2 a.m. at this point and I just wanted to sleep but couldn't help worrying about the potential domestic abuse going on next door. I decided to just keep an eye on it for now as I didn't have all the info. For all I knew, he could have gotten into a fight with someone else. As the weeks passed, I noticed that my new neighbors got drunk regularly and would argue almost every time. I could tell that Rick was the dominant one as his voice was a lot deeper and Chris seemed to be afraid of him during their shouting matches. This is why I kept my distance and never really socialized with them. I would even overhear them arguing about me and that Rick thought that Chris liked me, etc. I would just tune all of this out with headphones and video games, not to mention an active social life and full-time work to keep me occupied. I did find myself avoiding having guests over because of the neighbors. I would opt to meet people out as their arguments could be quite upsetting. This was working out fine enough for a while until Christmas Eve that same year. I was arriving home after coming from last-minute Christmas shopping. I was getting ready for a night of present wrapping as I was to visit my family the following day for Christmas. As I arrived home, I noticed 2 police cars outside and Anna, an Asian woman who lived a few apartments up from Chris, was screaming. I asked her what was happening and all she said was, "It's just so sad," while sobbing. I could see 3 officers trying to restrain somebody and there was blood on their uniforms. I came just a little bit closer to see Chris's oily brown hair in the center of the affray. His face was bleeding from his jaw where he had apparently been slashed by something sharp. They got him to his feet and I could see that his cheek had been cut so deep that the skin was flapping open as he struggled and resisted with the police. I recoiled in shock and went to comfort Anna, who was crying uncontrollably at this point. Suddenly, Rick's voice boomed out from nowhere. "You see what you've done, you loser." This frightened me and my instinct was to get myself and Anna to safety. Even though the cops were here, they had their hands full with Chris and I certainly didn't want to get involved in such an ugly fight where knives were involved. Anna refused to come with me and said that she would be fine. I looked around to see where Rick was as he kept yelling at Chris the whole time. The 3 cops struggled to restrain him. I could hear Chris whimpering apologetically in between. I couldn't see where Rick was, so I decided just to go to my apartment and lock the door. As I turned to go, I froze in horror as Rick's voice boomed, "Where are you going?" A deep chill went down my spine as my brain struggled to reconcile the fact that these words were coming out of Chris's mouth. I felt panic grip me as I realized that all this time Rick and Chris were the same person. All the fighting, laughing, drinking, and carry on that I couldn't help overhearing over the last couple of months had come from one solitary person, a lonely guy in his small 1-bedroom apartment. For some reason that made me feel sick. I learned later from Anna that this wasn't the first time the police had to come take Chris away. Anna explained that he spends a couple of months at the local psychiatric hospital each time. His father owns the apartment, so it's here waiting for him when he gets out. I moved out a few months later, and while it is a sad situation for Chris, I really do feel him. Today was like any other, just another ordinary day, working by myself in the store, checking out customers, stocking shelves in my moments away from the register. A normal day. At some point while on register, I greeted a man with a large dark beard, bald, and wearing glasses as he came through the door. He immediately smiled and got that surprised look on his face after seeing me as if he had just found his next victim. Eventually, after about an hour or two of being on register, I'd pretty much cleaned the store out of my customers and moved on to stocking candy. The man before with the beard approaches me with a smile and holds up a large white trash can. Excuse me. Yes, I reply, glancing up from the box I'm stocking. Are there any more of these in the back? This one doesn't have a lid, he says, gesturing to the large trash can in hand. Oh yeah, I can check for you. I smile and turn away and head toward the stockroom. I notice he's following me and think nothing of it, but glance down the aisles for any other customers as I walk, immediately taking note of the store's emptiness. Well, I guess it's just us in the store, I think to myself. Moving through the stockroom door, I'm quickly relieved this guy stops at the entrance. I'll be right back, I say as I make a turn around some full rolltainers, which due to just receiving a truck, our stockroom is full of them. They stand very tall and are like giant movable walls, but very heavy mind you. Being short myself, I don't have to move them much to make a path through and see what's on them. So after only a minute, I've made myself a little path, having 3 heavy ones on my right and left and in front of me. I decide to give up my search for trash cans. Sign, I go to turn around and inform him of my defeat, only to find he's in my tiny path of walls. A very tight squeeze for a man of his stature, standing directly behind me. Find them? No, I don't think I have any. I try to laugh and avoid acknowledging the creepy situation. I'm in a very small area with walls at my back and sides towering over myself, and this very robust man standing in the way of my only exit. In a room very far from any customers with no cameras and no other employees in the store. I'm helpless and increasingly growing scared at how this man isn't moving to let me out. I go to voice that I need to return to work after a solid minute goes by, but I am not able to get out a single word before he says in this creepy, almost shy voice, "You're just the cutest little thing, did you know that?" Within an instant, I'm scared and feel ill attention from this guy. Surprising myself though, I choke out without thinking. I just heard my bell. What? He looks confused but doesn't budge. I just heard my bell. There are people up front who need to be checked out and are looking for me. I stand nervously knowing full well neither of us heard the familiar ching from the service bell I keep on register. But what about my trash can, he asks, stepping forward but taking a glance back toward the trash can. And again, with lightning thinking, I blurt out, "I'll mark it down half price, no big deal," laughing and trying to act like nothing is out of the ordinary. I slip by him, seeing my opening at his turning around. I try my hardest to walk away, pretending to be calm as I exit the stockroom, then sprint to the front of the store the moment I was out of sight. He wound up leaving without purchasing the trash can. So, creepy guy who I expect to pull something like that again, I hope you and I don't meet again. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.